13.
O'clock.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Zach says, gasp, they're late. Yeah, Tom was in the can.
Yeah, I gotta do what I gotta do.
Well, I mean, he sits here for 10 minutes and then it's like less than a minute before we go, and he's just like, oh wait, hold on, I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I'm sitting here drinking too. We're sitting here drinking and talking.
Yeah, Tammy said it's probably Tom's fault. It usually is. It usually is.
I'm like, hold on.
One time it was, but yeah.
I'm like, no, hold on, it'll only be a few seconds. It only slowed it down for a few seconds.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like a little bit of a minute over,
Yeah.
but yeah, hey everybody. Because I sit here going over my notes and everything like that for like 20-30 minutes like before the show starts, so you know what I mean.
Side quest here, also Katrina's here. Tammy's here.
Everybody's here.
Is here.
Everybody's here.
Yeah, Zach's here. Murder Hornet's here. Yeah, it's gonna be a good show tonight.
I think so. I found this really interesting. I probably never would have come to this topic on my own, but a listener named Jennifer D, she recommended this to me. Like, she sent me an article about it, and I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. So I put it in the poll, and it won, like, hands down. I think it was, like, pretty much the only... Well, I'm not going to say it's the only topic that got votes, but it was one of only 2 topics that got votes. So it won, like, in a landslide. And once I started looking into it, there's something, like, really kind of interesting about this case, even though I will say that this particular mental hospital is not... It doesn't have the same reputation for abuses as a lot of the other ones had during this era, but there was just something really interesting about this one. I think that there was, particularly, I think people first started hearing about it in 2005, like a few years, like almost 10 years after it had closed, because they found a bunch of bodies, like underneath the land where it used to be.
I think I saw a documentary on this a long time ago.
And, yeah, so there were rumors that maybe they were, like, that a lot of people died there, they didn't know who they were, and they just kind of, like, threw them in mass graves and shit like that. But, there's not a huge amount of information on this. I found some, on Gutenberg, I found, like, some rule books and stuff like that from there, like, from when it first opened. And I found, like, some articles, like a guy that had, like, back in 1888, who checked himself in there, like he was a journalist, and he pretended to be insane so he could go in there and check it out. Yeah. And I found most of his articles. Some of it, I couldn't read all of it, but it's like a large bulk of it was there. So I kind of found that. But, there's not a huge amount about it, but I did kind of go down a rabbit hole, as I usually do. So we'll kind of talk about that. And I think the thing about it, too, that, this place in particular is interesting, but I also thought it was interesting just because it was emblematic of, like, how mentally ill people have been treated, like, throughout history. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, or throughout, like, American history, like, the last couple centuries. And I found a couple things that were kind of surprising. So, I'll get into that, like, as we go on. But, yeah. So, thank you very much, Jennifer, for suggesting this topic, because, like I said, I probably wouldn't have come to this on my own, but I found it really, really interesting. And I guess a lot of people thought it would be interesting because it won all the votes. So there you go. But yeah, so what else do we have to bring up?
Gotta do the show.
I mentioned this on Monday night's show, but just in case, I always like to mention it on the main show too, in case people don't watch the movie reviews. We got a very, very, very generous gift from one of our viewers, and she did not want to be named, obviously. She just called herself Calexico Mom, and she sent us this really nice little letter that said she's basically not our typical listener, but she just kind of stays home and listens to us, like, after her kids have gone to school or whatever, and she told us to stay rad, and also gave us a bunch of recommendations for movies and for topics. Now, a couple of the topics, I think 1 or 2 of the topics we'd already done, but a couple of the topics we hadn't, and so I put them in the poll, not the poll that's going up Friday, but the one that's going up the Friday after that, and a couple of movie ones too that we'll get around to. Like I said, she did recommend The Lady in White, and I'm pretty sure I did that one. It was on this channel. I think it was in my Flickers of Fear thing, but I think it was from Halloween, like a couple of years back. But some of the other ones, like Exorcism of Emily Rose and stuff like that, we'll definitely do that. But she sent us a really, really nice She sent us a Visa gift card.
Yeah, like $100.
$100 Visa gift card.
Nice.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We haven't decided what we're gonna get with that. Maybe we'll go out to eat or buy something we need, or I don't know. We'll think of something. We'll think of something.
And I'm gonna make a update video on the car.
Oh yeah.
People have asked for it in the comment sections. Maybe I'll make a quick video, and you could just drop it and then stream.
Yeah, that would probably be the easiest thing to do. I could just like throw it in the.
I got the headliner done. I relined the headliner. It looks like a brand new car, pretty much in the interior. Thinking about replacing that carpet with black. The car's 97%. Easily.
Yeah, it looks really good.
I think I keep getting an engine warning code of random misfire. It's not giving me the cylinder. It just says random, and it keeps coming back. So that means it's all the cylinders are randomly misfiring at times, but I can't feel anything. Car runs smooth as glass. So I think there's a vacuum leak in upper intake manifold, which is common on that car because they were plastic. They were like a high-tech plastic, and if you get a crack in the gasket, it'll suck air through there, which can affect the fuel-air mixture. You could get random misfires. That's the only thing I can think of. I'll get down to the bottom of it.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said,
They see those upper intake manifolds on the Ford 4.6. They go about 100,000 miles before there's something goes wrong with them. So a car will go through 4 of them because you get 400,000 miles on this car.
I mean, hopefully we can. Like I said, we won't even be able to put that much on there before we fucking die.
No. I don't think we put 100,000 on.
Not driving as little as we drive.
Yeah.
Camp Guy was saying, in regards to this state hospital, some states probably didn't have any treatment back then. Well, yeah, as we'll see, this was, he said you had to pack old Jethro up and take a covered wagon across 3 or 4 states. Yeah, as we will see, Stockton State Hospital, or as it was called back then, Stockton State Insane Asylum, because you could still call it that back then, was actually built in the 1850s, and it was the first hospital in California, and I believe the first west of the Mississippi that was specifically for the treatment of mental illness. So it's kind of, and that's just like 1853 this was built. That's when they started building it, you know what I mean? Like it took a long time to build it because it ended up being really big. But so that's what it was. So like prior to that, there wasn't really anything like that. Like they had hospitals, obviously, and if you had somebody that had some kind of mental illness, they just threw them all in like a regular hospital. They didn't have any specific mental health facilities. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just kind of threw them all in together. So this was actually the first hospital west of the Mississippi that was specifically for that. So that was one thing that I thought was really interesting. But like I said, some of the stuff that they, like some of the philosophy that they used behind it was kind of interesting. And like I said, I don't really know because there's not like there wasn't a huge amount of information on this. Like I dug around and I found like a bunch of stuff, but it's kind of hard to say how much. I found a documentary on YouTube that was like a history of this place, but I kind of feel like maybe, and I used a lot of the information because there's a lot of good like historical information about it, but I kind of feel like to an extent they kind of glossed over some stuff that maybe wasn't so kosher. You know, yeah. I'm just going to say that. And like I said, I don't know if that's the case or not, but I'm assuming that they probably did. And the thing about it too is that I kind of feel like as far as treatment of mental illnesses goes, like when you look at something like, for example, lobotomies, like nowadays people are horrified by the thought of like giving someone a lobotomy and shit like that. But back then, I don't think they really thought of that as particularly barbaric or particularly weird because like a lot of them were doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, I think, and I'm not saying it's not, it's objectively horrifying. It's an objectively horrifying thing to do to somebody. But I think in the context of the time, they wouldn't have thought it was that crazy. You know? I think it only seems barbaric to us in hindsight, but to them it didn't seem like that, even though it clearly is.
some of these drugs that they give them probably do the equivalent.
Yeah, probably.
Thorazine and shit.
Well, yeah, I had a little bit about that too.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll get into it. Tammy said, I used to work in a group home for people with physical and mental handicaps. The oldest resident we had was thrown into an insane asylum when she was very young. She had very bad behaviors because of the way they treated her. Yeah, it's just, I feel like the weird thing about it, and I think this was one of the things that I found most surprising, was that you would think that, you know, you go way back in time in the 19th century or whatever, and you'd think that it was all like, you know, the mental health facilities from particularly like the Victorian era, like in England and stuff, are notorious for being just hell.
Yeah.
When they would like charge money for people, like, hey, come look at the crazy people, and it's like, you know, people are like running around screaming and they're naked and they're pooping on themselves and shit like that, and people just thought it was hilarious. But prior to that, it was actually a lot more modern, like the way that they went about treatment in the early part of the 19th century was a lot more like what we would do, which I thought was really interesting. I hadn't realized that was what was going on, you know? So I thought that was like really interesting also.
I don't know what to make of any of that. I think it's just a case-by-case thing, you know what I mean? There's got to be impatience. There's people you just can't let them walk around. They're just they're too fucking crazy.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, is I think that they kept people who weren't crazy. I think it was a money-making thing.
Yeah.
If they got their hands on you, they probably wouldn't want to let you go, especially if you were a good inmate.
Right.
You know what I mean? You sit around and just make money from them because they're probably charging the state. So you're worth money to them as long as you're staying there. You're not causing any trouble. So chances are they try to keep you around. You probably have a better chance of getting fucking released if they didn't like you or tried to get rid of you.
Although, like I said, this hospital was kind of different in a lot, and maybe there were a lot of other hospitals like this in this time period. But the people that that went in there didn't actually stay long. They're like, you know, and I was reading an article that said, you know, a lot of people have a conception that, you know, you were thrown in an insane asylum if somebody didn't like you or they just threw you in there for anything and you were just stuck there forever. But they're like, actually about half of the patients of this hospital were there for like 6 months and then they let them back out.
Yeah.
So, and we'll get into maybe why that is. And so I'm sure that, like you said, I think it was on a case by case basis. I think whoever was running the shit, whatever state it was in, whatever the laws were in that particular place, I think it kind of was up to that. So I don't think they were all the same, like across the board.
I heard somebody say, I don't know how factual it was, but they evidently looked at the numbers and the statistics, and they said that pretty much more than half of the mass shooters that the United States has, had they been living in the early 1900s, they would have been institutionalized. Because if you were odd, they fucking locked you up.
Yeah.
So that would have. You keep weirdos fucking locked up, fucking lunatics. It saves a lot of trouble. Thing is that you got to identify them. You know.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's
you're
like
kind of locking them up in a way before they've committed a crime.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like, well, that's sort of where my head was at while I was reading about this hospital and about the differing philosophies of how to treat mental illness, which they kind of went into a little bit in regards to the history of this hospital. And it does seem like there are pros and cons, I guess, to like an institution model where you're keeping them in there like for their own protection and the protection of society around you, or like the later community-based model where they just like put you on medication and let you out and hope for the best.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
they got to have both.
Yeah, that's on a case by case basis. Right. You can't do one like if it's a person that's just kind of troubled or depressed or something like that. You don't want to lock them up and because that's not gonna help anybody. They're not dangerous. You know what I mean?
Not to other people,
right? And
they might be dangerous to themselves,
right? Exactly. So, and that's a factor that you have to consider also. But obviously, people that are dangerous to others, you know, need to be I'm not saying that they should isolate them or treat them horribly or anything like that. They shouldn't do that, like locking them up in a prison, but you should keep them away from other people just to keep other people from getting hurt.
Like, those two shooters, what was the guy, what was the name of that high school? The guy that they shot, the Columbine shooters.
Columbine. Yeah, it was like
those guys. If those guys were around in the 1920s, they'd have been locked up.
Probably so.
Because they had problems. They were exhibiting problems, and they had them on medication. At least one of them was on medication. But they'd have been locked up.
But the thing about it, though, is that, and I'm not excusing them, obviously, because they were nuts, but it's just kind of like a lot of teenagers, a lot of young people are troubled like that and go through those, but they don't, like the 99% of them never do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you can't just say, that those behavioral traits, and it's like, oh, that person, let's lock those people up because they're going to be school shooters, but you don't know that. That's kind of the bitch of it, isn't it? Yeah. You can't look into the future, and you can't put people away for shit they haven't done. I mean, obviously you can look for red flags, which is what they do now, and like try to get them help, and that's not always effective either, but it's just kind of like better than the alternative. You can't just lock everybody up that acts a little bit.
Part of the problem is the education system. If you ask me, it's got to be gender based, and when boys need to be in school until they're about 14. And then between 14 and 19, they need to be doing other shit. They're not fit for a classroom, most of them. The ones that are high testosterone and shit are shitty students. They don't want to sit in a fucking classroom. They got all this fucking energy. They need to be out building shit and learning fucking skills. And then later, once that fucking testosterone kind of trails off, they can go back to school and, get higher learning. I know I had a hard time in high school because I wasn't thinking about fucking school. I couldn't stand that shit. I was thinking about chasing skirt. That was the only thing that mattered to me. And a lot of the lower T dudes ended up going to fucking college. You know what I mean? And then the guys that were fucking having fun in high school, they didn't go to college. But the thing is like afterwards they were, equivalent to just as intelligent as the other guys. It's just that they couldn't apply themselves. They were fucking having a real strong fucking puberties,
Couldn't concentrate on it.
Can't concentrate on that shit, man. I don't want to sit in that fucking classroom.
I mean, a lot
Especially
of people
there's girls around.
A lot of people don't like it.
Yeah.
I didn't mind it. I didn't like junior high. I had a lot of problems in junior high, but high school was okay. But
I didn't mind junior high. I actually don't think high school is really necessary. You can pretty much teach a boy or a girl pretty much everything they need to know by the time 8th grade rolls around. Now, because it just seemed to repeat over and over again a lot of the same shit. Now they could go back 18, 19 and complete it, but there's that little period there. You shouldn't be in a classroom during that time. Maybe they have vocational training.
Well, I kind of feel like in general most people learn better in a hands-on kind of setting anyway than just being lectured at. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
I think the education system is mostly a money scam. Money scam and babysitting. Parents like it because the kids get sent off to school. They have to deal with them.
Xanada said, I remember hearing about one old-time hospital. You only needed 2 people's signatures to get put in, but you needed 5 people's signatures to get out.
Yeah,
that sounds about right. Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, particularly with women, but it happened to men too. It's like if you did some shit that people didn't like, it really wasn't that hard to get somebody committed.
Yeah, and they never really would specify what it was that you were doing, too. What was she doing? Was she blowing too many dudes? Was she...
Did
she get pregnant or something before she was married? What
that was probably a lot of it,
the main thing. You're right.
Or, women that were like, I don't really want to get married, or, or we're doing shit that was, not seen as feminine or whatever. Yeah. It's just like if you were doing something a little bit weird. Nowadays, being like, well, I like horror movies. If they'd had that back then.
Or she only wanted to date chicks.
You go. Yeah, or stuff like that.
You had to lock you up.
They they would.
Ain't that right, Katrina? Katrina said she went on a date. It was the worst date fucking ever. And she said her standards are low, too.
Well, don't tell everybody that.
She said, my standards, I don't have standards. My standards are low. And this bitch, all she did is cry the whole time, drank a whole fucking bottle of wine, said the wine was good. But then her ex-girlfriend that girl's ex-girlfriend keeps fucking calling her on the phone and everything.
I mean, any date that you're on
She
where
said it
the
was the
person
worst
talks to their ex the whole time, that's just... Please don't do that, people.
Katrina says she's got no standards. That's side quest hero. That's my lesbian army.
Why would
she's
you...
in the comment section.
You should have, I mean, standards.
Yeah.
That just means you have some, like,
Yeah.
self-respect.
Says she don't have no standards. Says she's too ugly.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
That's what she said, basically.
Why?
I don't know,
Don't say that.
She's fucking... Her trainer's
Don't
fucking getting her ripped. She's trying to get jacked. And fucking... I looked at her trainer, and fucking her trainer is fucking totally juiced. That dude's fucking shredded. He's on shit, though. She said, I want to get on some of that stuff. He goes, yeah, but you got to come down and wait first before we get on it. You know, he didn't say no. He just said she wasn't ready for it. She's going to be all right, though.
Zach said...
I got to show some army pictures of you, Katrina.
Zach says, one wonders how teenagers did back in the 1900s dealing with puberty.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know, actually. Well, and it's kind of interesting because I feel like until probably the 1950s, there was really no conception of like a teenage culture as separate from the adult culture. Like basically once you were old enough to work on a farm or whatever the fuck, you were kind of just treated like a grown-up, sort of. So there really wasn't this kind of transitional that we think about nowadays, that somebody's a teenager and they have their own thing going on and they have their own shit, you know what I mean? Like their own slang and all that kind of crap. But it's just kind of, that's kind of, I think that was like started in the 50s, maybe a little bit earlier, like at least as a distinct thing. So I'm not really, I'd be really curious, like when they were going through puberty, like back in the early 1900s. And it's just kind of like, I guess it was just...
Well, there weren't a lot of public schools either. Most schools were private.
Yeah, that's true.
And little schoolhouses, you know, in towns. And by the time, you know, they were 14 or so, they were pretty much done, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it depended on where you... Like, particularly like in small towns or rural areas.
My understanding is that high school, what we call high school, which is grade 9 through 12... that was considered to be kind of like a high education. Yeah. Like college for the day. Nobody went to university. Only real rich kids went to universities. Colleges, you know. Maybe out in Boston somewhere. And they were also religious. Basically, they were religious institutions in the 1900s. Girls didn't go. Girls were pretty much done. You know, they did have some private schools for girls, you know.
Although a lot of the main schools wouldn't admit women until much later.
Well, what would they need education for? Think of what they didn't do much back then. Everything was vocational training. You know, what did you need a high education for? Just there was no way to apply it. They didn't have a high tech industry. You know,
and it's not like they'd give a woman a job.
They had jobs. They had jobs. Women always worked. That's another myth. I think what that is
I meant like jobs outside the home, like you know what I mean.
They did have jobs outside the home.
Well, yeah, they did to some extent, but
my grandmother was in Mississippi. She worked her whole life. She worked at fucking drugstores and department stores and stuff.
Yeah, my grandma worked in a candy store.
You know, this was like right after the Depression. So all women worked. It's just when you hear that shit today because modern feminist movement want to take claim for getting women in the workplace. No, they were always in the workplace, always, and they were working on farms too. You know, and then you can go back and look in the Middle Ages in Europe, and women were running shops and running jobs.
Well, and I would like to say too
grave robbers and doing all kinds of shit.
I would like to say too that running a household is also a job.
Yeah,
and raising children and shit like that.
Yeah,
that is also work.
And most of them ran farms
and unpaid work.
Running a farm, I mean, that's fucking hard work, and it required brains. Only a dumb person thinks running a farm is hard. The average person can't grow food. They had to know everything, and there was a lot of organizational skills and planning, knowing how to fucking manage budgets. Yes. How to make sure a crop got yielded.
SideQuest Hero said, yeah, what they need education for, what could they possibly need to put in our tiny, frivolous brains, right?
There weren't any jobs then. There weren't any jobs.
Yeah, but, I mean, the thing about it, though, is that sometimes, like, people like myself like education for the sake of education.
There was no education for the sake of education.
No, I'm just saying that it's like necessarily, it wouldn't be like necessarily goal directed.
During the 1700s, you know, the guys like Jefferson and Jefferson and Washington and all those guys, they basically learned all the sum of mankind's knowledge in about fucking 4 years. And it wasn't much.
They didn't know much back then.
They didn't know much back then.
It's much harder now because
there's all this shit. It's specialization.
Now you got to know all this kind of stuff.
You got to know everything. It's all this high-tech shit. 17 and 1800s, it was so generalized.
You read like 3 books, you were good.
Everything. And it was really just reading classic literature, most of it, and maybe learning some mathematics. You might know a little bit about, you know, astrology.
It was so easy to be smart back then.
It was easy to be smart back then, yeah. But and then there wasn't any, and it was a rich man's fucking show-off thing. There was maybe the most educated motherfuckers in the 1800s was probably a lawyer, because you know what I mean. He had to read a lot of law books, but you know, there was only a couple dudes doing physics, and that didn't make money. You know, so that jobs didn't require education in those days. Most of them. It just required work.
Yeah, Xana said they still did bloodletting back then. Yeah, they were doing that still. As far as I know, they did it at this hospital too. Like a lot of hospitals were still doing this. Like at this point, yeah, they were bleeding the presidents with leeches. Yeah, they were.
Yeah, so all this shit about, you know, well, they denying women education. Yeah, in the 1900s there was no education really to give anybody, and it wasn't job related.
Well, no, like I said, it was just you know.
Yeah, it was kind of frivolous to be educated.
Well, and women did get educated back then too, but like I said, it was wealthy. It was
wealthy
generally
women,
the
and there was no
women.
application for it. There weren't any high-tech industries. There weren't industries as you know them. So it was more like something just showed off what good breeding you had.
Well, yeah, I think that was definitely a factor, sure. Kason Lee says, in Asian cultures, I think feminine is very much suppressed. It's sad.
I don't know. Japanese and Korean girls were hyper feminine. I lived in Korea for a year. It's super feminine. Just depends on what you consider feminine is, I guess. But
well, and I don't know because I don't live there, so I don't really know what the
Korean girls
application of that
real
is.
girly.
Right, but that's not what they're saying, though.
Okay.
That's not what they're saying.
They were like something out of the 50s. Kind of.
Yeah.
When I was there, but I was there in the 80s. Or excuse me, not 80s. Very early 90s.
Okay, so I guess we'll get on with the topic, since we've gone all over the place.
Yeah.
So this particular hospital, what ended up happening with this, how this came about, because as I said, this was the first mental hospital, let's call it that, west of the Mississippi, that was just for that, you know what I mean? So what ends up happening, obviously in 1848, was the gold rush. So California, at first, prior to gold being discovered there, it had a fairly small population. But over just a few years after gold was discovered, it kind of skyrocketed from, an estimated about 14,000 people, and this is in the whole state, to almost 400,000 people in a very short time. Now, a lot of the people moved to the San Francisco area, and it so happened that Stockton is, I'm not from California, so forgive me if I'm getting this a little bit wrong, but Stockton is kind of like right on the river that goes like from the San Francisco Bay to where most of the gold was being found. So a lot of people ended up moving there as well, so it was like a convenient kind of location. Now, obviously, any time you have an area like this that sees this massive explosion in population, you're gonna see social problems because suddenly wasn't that many people there, and now there's all these people here. There's overcrowding, there's poverty, there's all of these people coming here, particularly for the gold rush, because I feel like it was like a lot of transient kind of people, or like single men, that kind of stuff. So they kind of come there, and as the population grows, mental problems start to proliferate because, like I said, of the overcrowding, and like people were desperate for money and things like that. And one of the things, it wasn't just mental illness, but it was also like alcoholism was like a huge problem right around this time period. But there were really no hospitals in the area. Like I said, there were hospitals, but they were just kind of like, that's where everybody went. Like if you were acting crazy, they'd put you in there. Or if you broke your leg, they'd put you in there. They didn't really have anything just for mental health problems. You know what I'm saying? So what they decided to do, because the problem was becoming so bad, that in 1849, the town council of San Francisco, they first bought, I just thought this was kind of weird, but I guess they were just doing what they could do. They actually bought like this stranded ship, right? Like it couldn't sail anymore, I don't think, but it had just kind of been left there. It was called the Euphemia. And they bought it for $3,000 and essentially converted it into like a prison. You know what I mean?
A bunch of small rooms.
Right.
And it's inside an iron hull.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
They can't escape.
So it was just kind of like, so they were just like, they're like, whoa, mental hospital, there you go. Yeah. But I mean, it was a jail too.
Yeah, probably sheet metal rooms.
I'm not real sure.
Probably all steel, so yeah.
I'm not real sure. But yeah, that's what they put, and like they had the cops were like watching, like the chain gang dudes were like watching over the shit and everything like that. So if you were a criminal, they'd put you in there. And also, if you had mental problems, they would put you in there too, which is kind of nice. But like I said, they were trying to do something. It just probably wasn't the best solution, like having a prison ship. And, and I think even at the time, they thought, well, this is just going to be a temporary solution until we can come up with something better. At least they were doing something, Now, the ship, I believe, a couple years later, actually burned down, or at least like all the records were burned. I don't know if anybody was killed in it, hopefully not. But around the time that this was going on, they think, and I think it was just in this ship, they had 22 cases of, quote unquote insanity. Like people saying on this ship. Now, as I said, at this stage, they were basically like, they didn't really know what to do with people that were displaying mental problems. They're basically like, well, we're just going to throw them in jail, like just like they would with anybody else. So that's what they did. They just kind of like kept them contained is pretty much all they did. But as time went on, they realized that, well, we definitely need more hospitals in this area because the, population was getting so massive and there were just like all of these problems, right? So what they did in spring of 1851 was that the state legislature in California actually set up and gave funding for like 3 general hospitals. Now, these were not, they weren't mental hospitals at first. They were just general purpose, like hospitals. There were 3 of them, one of which was the Stockton State Hospital. Now, all 3 of these hospitals were meant to house, like I said, both mental illness and physical illness. So there wasn't anything specifically for like a specific mental health facility. But they did build 3 hospitals. Now, this was kind of hilarious, and I want to wait till Tom gets back because I wanted to say, I found some old records on the Gutenberg Project from admission for this hospital, like when it became like a mental health facility. And they had each thing that people were admitted for and like how many people were admitted for that. So here were the problems. Like some of the lists, I just left them off because most of them were just, well, not even most of them. A few of them were just regular. But the top one was mental excitement. Mental excitement.
What the fuck is mental excitement?
That was the first one. So I was just like, well, mental excitement, what does that mean?
It means that you're too jacked.
You're too excited about something?
You're too excited about something, yeah.
Yo, pipe down.
Yeah.
Like, are you just supposed to be like mentally lethargic? Is that supposed to be sane? But you're like too mentally excited, so that means you're
I don't
crazy.
I can't really fathom fucking mental
excitement.
No, what I'm saying, medical jargon of that era was crack pottery.
Well, and everything was like euphemistic. I feel like too.
Right.
Well, some of the things were.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, people. Fucking got Fred's fucking Steve. He fucking had a lot of background in the medical stuff and know people in the medical industry. fucking Indian doctor friends and shit of the family. Fucking, I think medicine has always been crackpot, pretty much. It's about selling patented medicine, and I think they make a lot of shit up. Yeah,
Well,
because they always want to sell treatments, not cures, and fucking certain treatments go in and out of fashion depending on whether or not they can sell them. There's a very, like when I was working for Dr. Matt, I'm not gonna say his last name, but his mom built Orlando General Hospital. Okay, I was his caretaker, fucking right hand man, running his barn and his property when he was gone. I was like his ranch hand, and no, he straight up told me like, yeah, that's bullshit there. Kind of like prostate exams, like that. You know, if you want fucking prostate massage, you get that at the rub and tug. You know, then they try to sell that to you as a man. This is what they're gonna do with the prostate. Because they tried to fucking VA tried to do that shit with me. You're gonna go in there and they're gonna rub on your shit. All right, they're gonna rub on it. And then they're gonna say, we think there's something in there. Come back later. We're gonna fucking check it. We're gonna do some more tests. And then they're gonna rub on it some more. And then they go, we think there's something might be in there, but let's come back fucking 3 another runs. We'll rub on it some more. They just keep doing that, and they say, this could be cancer. You might have some cancer, but it must be very slow growing. So come back once a year, and we'll fucking rub on your prostate. And then eventually they go, oh, by the way, you're so old now that if it is cancer, we're not going to operate it on it anyway. So you statistically look at it. Usually what they do is rub on your prostate till you die. And you paid them. They got money through your insurance company by doing that.
But did you enjoy it? I mean, that's really all that
matters.
What's that? Did you enjoy it?
That's
having your prostate rubbed on.
Yeah. So they're making money.
Say your pick.
They are making money off your insurance company by giving you a prostate massage.
Tom is convinced that the people at the VA think his ass is so hot that they want him to come back so they can rub his prostate every day.
Those girls the girls.
And I think he might have told them that too.
I told him that.
I thought you did.
I know you guys.
I thought you did at your last appointment.
You're just like my wife. and trying to fucking.
Did you really tell us that?
Yeah. And she's like, no.
She's always trying to stick stuff up my butt. I'm not always trying to stick stuff up your butt. I
refused that treatment. I found treatment elsewhere.
Where was that?
Just didn't go, man. I didn't do that. You either have deadly cancer or you don't.
Oh, you said I found treatment elsewhere. I was like, you went somewhere else and had somebody stick something up your butt?
If you have deadly prostate cancer, they'll go in there and cut that shit. And it happens fast. Usually it's fast growing. They go in there and cut that shit out, and you're going to be impotent. And you're going to be dead anyway. You might as well. You're either going to die or you're not. That's statistically what it says about prostate. Don't fall into that, hey, let us get some money out of you and rub your prostate. Go to the fucking rub and tug for that. They got girls that'll do that for you. Yeah. Don't fucking go to a doctor. And dude, be up in there. You feel that? Okay, that's enough. So, dude, I was just getting into it.
I'm sure they get that a lot.
Yeah.
DVD Dragon said, you see, the love of a prostate massage is different from that of a regular rub and tug.
Yeah. DVD was talking earlier, and I didn't say, I just laughed when I saw it. He says, to get the bumper sticker from a fucking new Mercury Grand Marquis pimp mobile, I need to have it call it Upgrade. Remember Upgrade?
Yeah.
That was the pimp's name. Upgrade.
Yeah. There you go.
Upgrade. I saw some pimp ass shit for the fucking Mercury Grand Marquis. You open the doors, and underneath the bottom of the door jambs are projector beams that project the Mercury logo on the ground for a courtesy light.
Oh.
I gotta have that.
That's too much, Tom.
I gotta have that.
I'm not gonna stop you, but that's too much.
It was a custom job. I
might have to wear a hood over my head, so I'm not seen with you.
The dude that had it was the dorkiest fat boy of all. He had that shit, and I was just going and he goes, "Yeah, I forgot what I got. It's a custom job, and it fucking was put a beautiful 4-foot in diameter, lit up Mercury fucking logo, a circle with the 3 lines. Looked great. Imagine showing up to the club like that.
Yeah." Everyone would be like...
I'd get out with my fucking pimp sedan. Yeah.
With your assless chaps that
the
somebody
assless
said.
Chaps.
Well, yeah, because Big Dog says Tom the ranch hand, and he was wearing assless chaps. All chaps are assless. I knew you were going to say
Chaps don't have asses.
Every time somebody says that, he always... Yeah, but assless chaps sounds so much better. Is there a band called the Assless Chaps?
No.
Please tell me there is.
Chaps are automatically
I'm going to listen
assless.
to them.
If they had an ass, they would just be pants.
That's exactly. But still,
chaps are overpants.
I know, but I'll defend assless chaps just because it sounds funnier.
Yeah.
Even though
that's Western shit, man.
Technically,
I ride English equestrian, hunter and jumper.
He has the pants with the things.
I do hunter jumper.
Yeah. With the what are those called?
Joppers.
Joppers. I knew that.
Real good Daner fucking boots and shit. Had the best.
Yeah, foxy.
Yeah.
You should get another pair of those.
Huh?
You should get some of those.
Yeah, I had to get them back. I had to get another pair of them.
You get a pair like you have like a little whip and everything.
Crop.
Yeah, I know.
It's a crop. Yeah. Yeah, had a little hard hat.
Don't correct me.
Yeah.
Yeah, DVD Dragon says VA always trying to get in a man's ass. And Ben says,
I don't trust him.
Ben said I've got a similar theory about breast cancer tests.
Yeah, just ask fucking Steven Seagal. He was a master at finding cancer in breast. He would offer a free service wherever he went.
I wouldn't let Steven Seagal within 100 miles of my breast.
Doing like that, you know.
I mean, you can do it, but you're not Steven Seagal.
Yeah.
You hear that, Steven?
Yeah.
You're not allowed. I have a breast restraining order.
Yeah.
My breasts have a restraining order against Steven Seagal. They're not allowed to come within. Let's be charitable and call it 50 miles. You know what I mean? Yeah. He can still come to Florida if he wants to, but he can't come.
DVD Dragon said the girls at the rub joint got a strong grip. Okay.
Oh, how would you know?
He goes. He probably goes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always kind of wondering where it would. I mean, we make jokes about this one massage place that's near the buffet that we go to.
It's always empty.
And there's nobody ever parked there.
It's always open, but there's no.
Yeah, it's always open. I call it the rub and tug, but it's like I'm just out of curiosity. One time I said I'm gonna look this fucking place up on Yelp, and most of the reviews sounded normal though. Yeah, so I was like, so I don't know if everybody was using euphemisms that I don't know about, or if it's just a regular ass place.
Here in Florida, the rub and tugs are all Chinese massages. That's where it's going down. Mm-hmm. Where they got the Chinese girls working in there, and they busted one across the street from fucking Koi Wan years back.
That's right.
Yeah, and they only busted that place because the girls were sleeping in there. They were living in there.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
They weren't all Chinese. Some of them were white girls working in there. They interviewed one of them. She was just like, yeah. She didn't deny it all. You working? Yeah, I was living in there. Yeah.
Hey, gotta make money somehow.
They kicked us out.
Now what are they gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah, she was just some.
Honestly, I don't really have
a chick about 25.
I don't really have a problem with look, as long as you're not letting children in the place and everybody knows what's what and people are paying and they know what the service is, I don't have a problem with it.
Florida doesn't care.
I mean,
they just don't want those girls living in there.
Yeah, I get it, but it's just like where are they gonna go? They probably can't afford to live anywhere else. I don't know. I was just worried about that.
China, they were living right in there.
I know.
Yeah.
Zach says, okay, but what if your breasts had a restraining order against each other? That would be a problem, wouldn't it?
You need a special bra to keep it separate.
To keep them 50 miles apart? I don't think they make a bra like that.
It's a cleavageless bra.
It's a cleavageless bra.
Like some out of the 50s. It's just two cone-shaped fucking...
I kind of like that look in particular outfits. It is nowadays. It has
dress shirts.
Nowadays it has a very fetishistic look to it, which I kind of dig. But that's all it is. It's fetishistic. If you wore that normal, people would be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
Like, what are you wearing? But yeah. So how do we get distracted? Oh, mental excitement.
Yeah.
Mental excitement. Somebody said it's probably hyperactivity. Yeah, that sounds about right. This one was funny to me. This was another thing that would get you put into the asylum. And this is from this actual hospital. I found this booklet. Disappointment. Pecuniary or political. That was...
Okay. What they're talking about is if you're unhappy with politics or if you're just too jacked about shit. They're talking about manic depression.
Well, pecuniary, that means anything to do with money. So if you're disappointed that you don't have any money, I'm like, well, put me in the asylum then, because you know what I mean?
Trying to broaden the market.
Obviously. Yeah. Because I'm like, but when I went through this list, I'm like, so this is everybody then. Everybody. This is everybody.
Yeah. They're trying to get a maximum customers. So I'm saying, man.
Between mental excitement, money, and political disappointment, the next one was... desertion of wife, husband, or mistress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I thought was funny that they had that.
They got you. They got you. Anything you do, they got you. So I'm telling you, man, the medical industry was always a scam. They can fix you and heal you if you get busted up. You know, they'll do surgery and put you back together. They can save your life, but that's not real profit making. They want to make a lot of money off of not doing anything, rubbing on your prostate or fucking telling you that your blood sugar looks wrong or just shit like that. Like there's diabetes, but a lot of the shit, like they worry about cholesterol a lot. Not everybody's gonna have the same cholesterol levels. They put my dad on statins because he had high cholesterol. The statins nearly killed him. He's supposed to have high cholesterol. He's eating all that fucking grease, you know.
Well, to be honest, I had high cholesterol for a long time, and it kind of runs in my family. And both my mom and my sister were on cholesterol medication, and they told me, I said, well, the doctor kind of wants me to put on medication, and I don't want to do it because I don't take anything. And they're like, don't, because they both took statins, and they were like, oh, it made us feel like crap.
Yeah.
So I didn't take them. And honestly, what I did was I just changed my diet, and I didn't eat as much like meat or dairy or something like that, and I got my cholesterol like way down. And that doesn't work for everybody, I guess. Yeah. But it worked for me, so I never went on medication.
They make a huge
for that.
commission on statins and shit like that.
I don't know what my cholesterol is now because I don't go to the doctor anymore because I can't afford it because I don't have.
They will tell you anything. They're into making money. Yeah.
Xanada said the prices here in Nevada for prostitutes is outrageous, $5,000 plus.
Oh yeah, they're marketing.
I guess it's priced to keep the riffraff away.
The market, yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's up at the bunny.
But the thing about it though is that they don't have to like fuck with as many dudes. If if it's $5,000 a pop,
it's only old dudes and they don't want any trouble.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If you're just like, that's what happens if you're just like having to work the streets or whatever, and it's just like $25 a pop or something like that. You have to like fucking blow a lot of scumbags.
Just download fucking that one app. They got them on there.
Tom knows all the prostitution apps.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of the app. Trying to remember the name of the app.
Don't you bring any STDs home.
No, I know. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Go ahead, keep on going.
I'm teasing you, Tom.
Yeah.
You do know a lot about this stuff.
I know a lot about that stuff.
But yeah, desertion of wife, husband, or mistress. I note that they didn't put desertion of like a woman leaving her male lover, so I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, desertion of wife, husband, or mistress, that was there. Love and jealousy.
Yeah.
That was also a thing.
Yeah, so they got you coming or going.
Yeah.
Everyone is a customer.
Right. Grief and fright. Those two were together also.
Okay, yeah.
I'm like, this is everybody. It's everybody.
Yeah.
Religious excitement.
Yeah. Yeah, you crazy.
Woohoo, Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah.
That. Disappointed affections.
Yeah, you got your heart broken.
Yeah, I'm guessing that. Yeah, I'm guessing that's if you love somebody and they don't love you back, or somebody broke up with you or something. Intense application.
Yeah. Okay. I remember the name of that app is called Trist.net. I think Trist.link, I think is what was the name of it. You can download that app. TRYST. .link, I think, is the name of it. That's a hooker app. You just search locally, you'll see what girls are working. The pictures of them and full photo shoot layouts and their schedule and yeah.
Tom knows a lot about this.
Yeah, Trist.link.
How many prostitutes have you got off there?
None. None. I've seen it. I wanted to make sure you weren't working there.
Is that really what you thought?
Well, you accusing me, I'm accuse you. I was just going to see Jen's not running. Jen never goes anywhere. So
no. Yeah, it was like
I actually wanted to see if fucking some of the people we knew were on there. Want to see who is local.
I'm always kind of interested.
I was like when we watch some of the girls we would know would be on there.
Yeah, I kind of always feel like whenever we watch like amateur porn or something like that, I'm convinced we're just going to see somebody we know.
A couple of them we do know.
I mean, yeah, but a couple of them it was not a surprise because we already know that they do that.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm always just gonna one of these days we're gonna be watching someone and be like, hey, that's what's their name, and it's like and it's a total shock. You know what I mean?
There's a girl named Pinky Powers. She got these huge fucking tits.
She's cool. I like her.
Yeah, we know her. We're friends of hers. Pinky Powers, and the other one is fucking Princess Pumpkins. Was the girl she works with.
Yeah.
She's go to the club. And they're both massive beach ball size.
Yeah.
Implants.
There's a picture of me and both of them somewhere.
Yeah.
From a few years back.
Pinky
from
Powers.
From that fetish party.
Yeah, with an S. Powers, like Austin Powers.
Yeah.
She's nice.
Yeah.
When you meet her in person, she's real nice.
Yeah.
Funny as hell. She does mostly streaming, but she does some porn.
Yeah. Yeah, intense application, that was one. I'm guessing that's if you're like super into one thing, like to to a degree where it's weird. Maybe. That's kind of what that sounds like to me. Intense application. Like somebody's like, ooh, I'm really into model trains, and that's like all you do is model trains. And people are like, yeah, I kind of feel like that's maybe what that is. The next one was seduction. Just that, with no other explanation. I'm not sure if that means that you're seducing people or people are seducing you, or not really sure. Also, I thought this was kind of interesting. Spiritualism. So if you're into spiritualism, or Mormonism was also on there. So if you're a spiritualist or a Mormon, that's a cause to be locked up right there.
That was about the same thing, though, back then.
Yeah, I mean...
Mormons were kind of spiritualists.
Yeah, it is kind of similar, I guess. But it's just kind of funny that the way that it was worded. Just those two things, if you believed those, then that was grounds. Intemperance in spirits, meaning... that's generally alcoholism, but it's according to the list, it could also mean opium addiction, too.
Yeah.
And, of course, good old masturbation.
Oh, yeah, make it crazy.
And they called it that, too. They didn't have, like, a euphemism for it. So I thought that was kind of funny that they actually just did come out and call it masturbation.
Can't control it.
Which I'm like, well, what? And they didn't even put excessive masturbation.
No,
they just put masturbation.
It's enough, they're just trying to get everybody in the fucking...
That's what I'm saying. So I'm like, between all of these things, I'm like, that pretty much covers everybody.
Yeah.
That pretty much covers everybody. So everybody's going to...
They even mention, like, if you're doing this in public, you're on a train, jerking it, you know what I mean? Like, some perv. No.
Right, yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, it would be different if it's like, oh my god, he's jerking it so much that he's like, he forgets to eat, and that's and he can't get a job.
Yeah, runs around in the fucking...
runs around in the street naked, like, jerking off on people.
Yeah, he's what's called a jack-off artist.
Right, like, yeah, obviously, like, lock that person up. But just, like, regular-ass masturbation, like, in your own house, yeah, I don't think that's grounds. But so they didn't really specify. But like I said, so everything on this list, I think that covers pretty much everybody. Covers pretty much everything, which I guess was the goal.
Yeah.
There was some other stuff on there too, but it wasn't as funny. Because some of it was just regular, like syphilis or whatever. So at first, like I said, when they got the go-ahead to do like a specific hospital for mental illness, they kind of just cobbled together this wooden building that just had like 12 rooms in it. And that was kind of the earliest thing. So the first guy that was appointed as the superintendent was this guy named Dr. Robert Reed. Now, he was originally from Pennsylvania, and then he'd had a practice in South Carolina, but he actually moved out to California to look for gold. That he was going to, so he was going to do that. So he did that for a little while, and then he decided, I don't really want to, look for gold anymore. It's just too much trouble or whatever. So he decided to go to Stockton and set up medical practice there, and then he ended up being the superintendent at this new place. Now, at this point, they're like, because they, kind of codified this one place, which was still really small at the time, and they're like, okay, we're going to make this the hub for all the mental illness. So everybody that had like the other hospitals, like regular hospitals that had mental illness cases, would send them all to this one place. So it would be, you know what I mean? So they basically, so there was a bunch of them at first, but they had to like keep them in rented accommodation, obviously, until the building was big enough to accommodate everybody. Now, in 1853, it was just first called Stockton General Hospital, obviously, because it was first just built as a regular hospital, but then they changed it to, I've seen either the Stockton State Insane Asylum or the Insane Asylum of the State of California. I've seen both of those names, so I don't know exactly what it was legally. Now, so as I said, this was the first publicly funded psychiatric facility west of the Mississippi River. Now, the hospital, there was a guy named Captain Charles Weber, and he donated like 100 acres of land that they started building this big hospital on. Now, from the beginning, and I think this happened a lot with mental hospitals, there's been a long-standing problem with overcrowding. So even when they first started building the building, which was kind of like a two-story building to start with, and then they had like, a kind of other wooden building like over on one side. But even from the first, from them first building it, they still had like 20-ish patients more than they could really accommodate. And that would continue like pretty much as long as it would open, at least up until I believe like the whenever the peak was, which I believe was maybe in the 50s or 60s, and then after that, like, it started going down. But it always had like way more people in it than were supposed to be in it, which, like I said, that was kind of par for the course, I guess. Now, later on, they built they had separate wards, obviously, for the men and women. The female patients, their supervisor was this matron whose name was Mrs. Matilda Masters, and Dr. Reed actually later married her. And Dr. Reed was actually in charge of the male patients, and they had like so many attendants like looking over the people. One of the funny things that I found out about this, they said, was the people that worked there as attendants, there was a really high turnover, I guess, because, as I said, this was kind of a new endeavor, and maybe people that were working there were perhaps really not qualified, or they, or maybe it was like really hard work or whatever. So there was really high turnover, and they couldn't really find a lot of people to fill the positions. So according to this one thing that I saw, it said it was not unusual for a patient to be discharged one day and go to work the next day as a staff attendant.
Yeah.
Which I was just like, because they're like, hey, you know how this place runs, right? Hey, want to work here? You're probably all right now. Yeah, it was that kind of situation. Now, this is kind of the thing that I thought was really interesting. So Dr. Reed, who was the first superintendent, they had something back then which they called moral treatment, which sounds terrifying, but it was actually kind of cool. Now, moral treatment of people with mental disorders, basically, it's kind of more like a modern model where they're saying, you're not supposed to show the patients any anger or violence. You're supposed to completely stay calm. You're supposed to encourage self-respect in them. You're supposed to like keep them calm, keep them busy, and like don't ever hit them, don't ever yell at them, which I thought was kind of cool. That's kind of like the way that they would deal with them nowadays. And another thing that was really important, and one of the reasons why they wanted to build it in Stockton, was because they thought that the climate and the surroundings were conducive to mental health, because it was really pretty and there was a lot of trees and shade, and the weather was temperate. So they really encouraged a lot of outdoor activity, regular exercise, like a really good diet, and they really tried to keep track of everybody, you know what I mean? But I thought that was like really interesting that, and this is prior to the Civil War, but really a lot of the hospitals, the mental hospitals that were around in this time period, like I said, this was the first one west of the Mississippi, adhered to this philosophy of moral treatment, where basically you were not allowed to mistreat the patients, you weren't allowed to hit them, you weren't allowed to yell at them or anything like that. You were really trying to like treat them with respect and compassion, because that would help them get better. And and like I said, the diet and like outdoor exercise, keeping them busy, keeping them doing something productive, which to me sounds
like they're reading Greek stuff.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Which is that you treat people holistically through holistic medicine, and which is actually how you would do it. It's a lot wiser.
Well, yeah, like I said,
and really, America was kind of known for that attitude. Europe was in ancient times, not today, but 1700s, 1800s. Europe had brutal prisons. They mostly hanged people to death. You could be hanged as a minor.
Yeah, they didn't give a shit.
Bread. Mental institutions were kind of like zoos. They were filthy. They beat people. And they had weird tortures.
Yeah.
But America, actually, to its defense, was pretty good about that through most of its history. And we invented the penitentiary system. And the penitentiary system is how to lock up criminals, where they pay penance. And it was supposed to be almost like a religious prison, where you were in a cell, but you had food and heating, and you were to work every day, because idle hands do the devil's work. So they had them in there working, making shoes in their cells, and they did a certain amount of time and tried to rehabilitate them so they could get out. All right. Now, they didn't always do that. Not all every state was different in the United States. There's 50 of them. Some of that shit went wrong, and they created dudes like fucking Panzeram. All right.
Well, he's a bit of an outlier. Yeah. Well, he's a lot of an outlier.
Yeah, which he was made by an orphanage system and a prison system that was totally inhumane, and that's where they really kind of doubled and tripled down on this penitentiary concept, where you don't torture prisoners. See, in Europe, they did it kind of like something out of the Bible, where you're in hell now, so they're the devils and the demons, and they're punishing you for what you did.
Yeah, how'd that work out?
It doesn't work. You'll make a harder, stronger criminal.
Yeah, you'll just make them worse.
They'll come out and they'll fucking do
because
all kinds
when
of
people
shit.
Are horribly mistreated.
Yeah, like what happened to Panzeram.
Right.
He was just a
you
very
see what
violent
happens.
Homosexual rapist and murderer. What was his name? Charles? Carl Panzeram. That's right. And he went from a normal kid in a orphanage to eventually an adult man that would go around and pull guns on dudes and rape them and rape little boys and kill them and throw them overboard and shit, fucking in boats and just horrible shit. Make people hold dudes at gunpoint, hold bums at gunpoint in the damn train cars, make them have sex with each other and then kill them. He was fucking brutal. And it's because he hated men. Hated mankind. Weirdly didn't commit any crimes against women. Didn't have a grudge against them.
Well, I guess no woman did anything bad to him.
Yeah, but he was sexually assaulted as a child and later on in the prison system, so he just hated men. And
I will
his
note,
main jailer, who was a low-level guard, got the whole story for Panzeram, and he was that dude. When he got more rank, ended up actually reforming the American prison system. It was his friend and guard.
Yeah.
And once he understood how Panzeram got that way. Yeah.
And I mean, I will note, obviously, that a lot of people have been through equivalent abuse to what Carl Panzeram suffered and did not do what he did. So there does have to be another factor to it. But I will note that treating people like shit is just never... That's just never going to work out well in the long run.
Panzeram was not normal.
No, obviously not.
He was treated like shit 80% of his life. He mostly wasn't free. He mostly was in some kind of prison or an orphanage where they just treated him like an animal. Every time you did let him free, he just killed a bunch of people. You know.
Yeah, you can, and people like that, obviously, you know, and it's horrible what happened to him when he was growing up, and that shouldn't have happened. But once he's an adult, you can't let somebody like that run around loose. You just can't.
No.
You know?
So you have to have a prison system to where a guy goes to prison and eventually he serves his time. He's got to leave it behind him. You know, where he can move on. Panzeram couldn't move on, man. Fucking.
So you just got to leave him in there. So like I said, I'm not saying you have to mistreat them. I'm not saying anything like that. But it's like you have to keep them contained for the sake of everyone else. He's not the only person in the world, you know.
And some dudes, they commit a crime and they can't be released.
Yeah, exactly. There is a certain percentage that there's absolutely no way that they would ever be let back out again.
So I'm not soft on crime. I'm just saying we've got to be realistic. And one thing I don't like, I think America gets wrong, is the felon concept. Yeah, maybe you should keep track on how many crimes a guy has committed. But once you've done your time, your debt to society should be repaid. And if you're released, you should get full rights again. You right to vote.
No, I agree with you on that.
Right to own guns and fucking all kinds.
Because
of shit.
if they didn't think that you were, fit to be back out in society again, they shouldn't let you out.
Shouldn't let you out, right?
If they're letting you out,
then you're a human and you got human rights.
They should give you him. Now, if you do some fucked up shit again, then they'll put you back in there and don't let you out. But I'm just saying that it's like, let them be a person, because I think you're shooting yourself in the foot by letting people out and then not restoring all their rights, and so restricting them getting back into a normal life, which maybe will prevent them from doing further shit.
Right. See, what's happened in the United States is that the whole felon concept has been going on since really for the 60s. That's really where it got strong. You now have a huge criminal underclass.
Right.
Almost like a culture. They cannot they cannot re-enter society because of their records.
Yeah.
They can't fucking do shit because of their records. So it keeps them in the criminal class.
Yeah, because there's nothing else they can do.
That's all they can do.
I mean, they get back out. It's like, well, they can't get a job. So it's like, what the fuck are they supposed to do for money? They got to live somewhere.
Right. And I don't think a guy should be like there are certain questions on those job applications I think are unconstitutional. If you're trying to work at a grocery store and they ask you if you ever committed a crime, they should not be able to ask you that question, because that's self-incrimination now, and you've already paid for that crime. Now maybe the law enforcement shouldn't be able to know, but no, you should have a clean slate. If he's free, then that means you got your rights back. You paid for that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
There may be some exceptions for serial offenders.
Yeah, and like I said, it would be on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, especially like sex offenders.
Yeah, because they're
notoriously serial offenders.
Yeah, there's a high
So that's a different situation, but...
Right.
Man, some dumb kid fucking, breaks into a fucking house or something, while the people are away and steals some shit and gets caught, and all of a sudden that dude's lost all his rights for the fucking rest of his fucking life, even though he only did 18 months in jail.
Yeah, that's gonna show up like forever.
Yeah, fucking,
And even if it was something dumb or like something minor.
Yeah, right.
That is kind of fucked up because it like ruins your life forever. And like I said, it really encourages that person to just kind of be stuck because they don't really have much other choice.
They can't turn over a new leaf.
Right. So yeah, it does make shit a lot harder for people.
And that was not the American way. The traditional American way, you could have guys, they would fucking be a train robber and then they'd go fucking do fucking 7, 8, 9 years after train, become a lawyer during that time and come out and practice law. John Wesley Hardin, I think,
and I kind of feel like a lot of people, depending on what their original crime was, if they are treated the right way and and shit like that, and they serve their time, most people would probably just go back to having a normal life. You know what I mean?
Some of the best Old West lawmen also were ex-criminals. They did time, did a couple years, came out, then they became a sheriff's deputy over time and became a good lawman because they could catch criminals. They knew how criminals thought. They're an ex-criminal.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you automatically are on the force. I'm just saying, if you have a sheriff that could go, yeah, I trust the guy, he's all right. He can come on the team. Then,
if you have people that would like vouch for you,
then
Yeah, there has to be some kind of system in place.
Right.
That's why I kind of think that people, and I'm not talking about like fucking serial killers or anything like that, like
rapists,
or people like that, but just people that just do dumb shit like rob liquor stores or whatever, and don't hurt anybody. But it's just kind of like people like that. If they're gonna go to prison, they gotta go to prison. But it's just like, don't just put them in prison and put them in with all these fucking hardened motherfuckers that are just gonna make them worse. Yeah. It's just kind of like prepare them for getting out. That's what was. You would think that was kind of like the whole point. Right. Of putting them in there. It's like while they're in there,
like
maybe
re-education.
Right. It's like, they can take some classes, they can get a degree, they can do some. I know some prisons do that, and I think that's a lot more likely to succeed than just throwing them in a hole with a bunch of other criminals.
You put them in hard labor
and hoping for the best.
You put them in hard labor, you get them working around in the community, fucking you work them like they're in the service,
Yeah, and like I said, just teach them a skill. Right. I mean, if they don't have a skill or something like that, something they can do when they get out, and then you have to have some kind of system of, helping them find jobs when they get out. And like I said, I know that some states do have that, like some places do have that where they do help like people get jobs afterward, and they do have some incentives in some places for giving jobs to people that have records.
Media said, man, they're talking about letting all these criminals No,
that's not what we meant.
If you're too dangerous, then you should be locked up forever.
Yeah, some people should absolutely never get out.
Right.
Just for the good of society.
A guy who's only going to do 5, 6, maybe even 10, 15 years, if you decided his sentence is served and he's paid and due, he should get total restoration of the normal rights of a citizen because he paid his due.
Yeah.
And
that was the sentence.
Right.
You served the sentence.
Right.
You got out.
Right.
So that should be the end of it, you would think.
You're even now.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, you kind of think ideally that would be the situation.
Right.
But so I do kind of feel like it kind of blew my mind a little bit because I think I was thinking about, because somebody was asking when the gold rush was. Yeah, it started in 1848. So I was thinking of, the notorious mental asylums particularly from the Victorian era, which is late 19th century. Which were more like torture, like dungeons, you know what I mean? Where they were like torturing people and people would pay, like particularly in London and stuff like that, they would pay and come see the crazy people like being tortured and,
Get the demons out of them.
And actually, when they stopped doing that, like when they stopped letting the public come in there, then it got even worse because they're like, oh, nobody's watching us now, so now we can do even worse shit.
There wasn't any oversight.
So it got really bad. Like I said, they did, like, in the early 20th century, like a lot of journalists and stuff, again, like got themselves committed because, you know, for muckraking purposes, so they could write articles on what was going on in there. And some of the shit that they found in there in the early 20th century was fucking horrifying.
Yeah.
Like, they were just, like, putting people in cages. People were, like, walking around naked, like, shitting on themselves. It was just, you know, and all the shit they were doing to them was, like, torture. You know what I mean? But the weird thing, and I never really realized this because I was kind of thinking of things in those terms, but prior to the Civil War, the hospitals were more like modern hospitals in the, you know, not obviously in technological terms, but in philosophical terms, where they were thinking, well, we should be nice to these people, like, and give them something to do, like something productive to do, and put them in a nice environment, and don't yell at them, and like keep them kind of chilled out, and
don't punish them for being
and
crazy.
don't punish them because it's not their fault. And it's just kind of like, that's crazy. Like, I didn't think that long ago that they were actually thinking in those terms, and they actually applied it, and they really seem to have applied it in this hospital in particular, because Dr. Reed, the first superintendent, was a believer in that particular philosophy. So whether it's true or not, or whether they're just like painting a rosy picture of it, but it did seem that a lot of the patients that went in there didn't stay in there for very long, and they attributed that partially to effective treatment methods. They were treated like human beings. Like they didn't, like later on they did do the shit that all the mental hospitals were doing, like electroshock therapy and lobotomies and sterilizing people and shit like that.
Remember I told you about my friend Larry up in Louisiana?
Yeah.
Larry the pimp. He was an ex New Orleans pimp. He was cool as shit. He told me about Blackula. He was a little black guy. One of his gigs was to work in a mental hospital there in outside New Orleans, and he actually talked about electroshock therapy. He said that the patients actually liked it.
I'm sure
and thanked him afterwards. They'd fucking be some. You know, he was an orderly there, and you know, I guess this was before he was a pimp. But I
was an orderly, and then I was a pimp.
Yeah.
That's a good resume.
Yeah, he was an orderly, and he was a pimp. Larry was fucking cool, man. He liked the goth scene, but he was an old man, and he was like, God, man, this is cool. Because this reminds me, you know, over time I'd talked to him before people. He'd show up early, you know what I mean, before everybody else would show up. And I'd be able to chit-chat with him and stuff. And he would say, this is a lot like the old pimp game way it used to be. You know, it's like, really? He goes, yeah, it's like vampire pimps. You guys are all right, you know. Look at these hoes. You know, it's fucking funny. But he told me he worked at that mental hospital. It was one of the state institutions. And I said, they were doing lobotomies. He goes, oh, yeah, they did the lobotomies. They did electroshock treatment. I was, man, they were frying those people's brains. He goes, no, they liked it. It's like, really? He says, yeah, they'd be all upset and everything. We'd fucking bring them in, put them down, and fucking hit them with a shock treatment, and it'd reset them, and like they'd lay there motionless for a few seconds. They'd get up, and then they'd start thanking you for it. They felt a lot better. So it was just like, it would like reboot the system. That's how you describe it.
It's like rebooting.
He said they liked it. Yeah. They'd be nice and calm.
I'm kind of curious about it, but I'm not curious enough about it to get it done to myself.
Nah.
No thanks.
No thanks. But he said those.
Even if I thought it would help me, I really don't think so.
Larry said they were fucking crazy though. They were crazy people. They weren't.
So it wasn't a situation where it's like, why are these people in here?
No,
they seem normal.
No, they were crazy. They were real crazy.
Yeah, I'll get into like the Stockton Hospital. I actually found on this kind of obscure little channel that only has like 800 subscribers or something. I found like some snippets of interviews with a woman who used to work there at this hospital back in the 50s. And she basically said most of the patients there were real violent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, she didn't really seem to say anything about, like, oh, some of them were normal or anything like that. I mean, maybe she was just talking about ones that stood out.
No, Larry said some had to be restrained constantly. Had to put helmets on them. They'd bash their heads against the wall.
Right, yeah, that's kind of the same kind of shit.
Say nonsense. It didn't make any sense, and fucking, they'd get so fucked up, they'd shock them, and then they'd come out and they go, oh, thanks, I feel much better. Yeah.
Interesting.
Man. Thank you. And they'd be normal for a while.
Right.
Then it would
Well,
come
I guess
back.
that's why that was such a widespread practice, because
Yeah.
they saw shit like that and they're like, oh, well, I guess it works.
I'm sure it damaged the brain, though.
Oh, well, yeah.
But it made him feel better. So the thoughts would go away.
Man, we should do a whole show about
Yeah.
electroshock therapy. I'd be interested.
Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't good for you.
No.
But-
Like I said, I would never, even if I thought it would help me, like, I don't think I would ever do it, just even out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Even though I am curious what it would feel like, but
Yeah.
I'm not that curious. You know what I'm saying?
You said they'd be relieved. They'd be relieved and they'd feel better. That the thoughts went away. They'd be good for
I get
they'd be
it.
there for it'd be good for a couple days.
Right.
And then start coming back.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
Xanada said, my uncle went to prison for grand theft auto. He learned carpentry, and 15 years later was making over $300,000 a year from his own business. He learned carpentry at Utah State Prison.
This dude lives 2 houses down that blasts the neighborhood apart. He's in a big
that
ass
asshole.
fucking mansion and got his giant truck, and he's got an entire crew, inmate laborers, and they do construction around here. I guarantee you he's an ex-con. And that dude's living large. He thinks he's Kid Rock over there. With a fucking monster truck, and his house is beautiful.
And it's not even weeknights or weekend nights anymore.
Yeah.
Now, like, I think he did that shit on like Tuesday.
Yeah.
Because we were in the bedroom watching a movie, and it was rattling our bedroom windows.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's fucking
Subwoofers
Tuesday
and
night. It's
shit.
like 10 o'clock.
And
Knock it off.
And it's his truck.
Yeah.
It's
like in his driveway.
It's the truck in his driveway. And he's fucking...
And he's 2 houses down.
Yeah, and he's in the housing commission, so you can't complain.
And it's far. Like, because we have a big yard, and the people next...
We're on an acre property.
And the guy next door is like a big yard.
Yeah.
So it's not like the house is right on top of us.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of a distance.
Yeah, and his house is a 2-story fucking mansion, beautiful Spanish, colonial kind of nouveau Spanish-looking house, tan with a beautiful manicured...
It is a pretty house, yeah.
Beautiful manicured garden.
All the houses in here are pretty.
Yeah, we're in a beautiful community. But he's like from the hood. But that motherfucker, that's got to be...
Well, he's got money. You can't do anything about it.
That's probably $1 million home, and $1 million in Florida fucking costs you a lot. So maybe $700,000 probably.
I'm assuming. I mean, well, is it bigger than ours?
It's a little bit bigger than this one.
It looks a little bit bigger than this one, and this one was for
$425, but we're up to $475, almost $500,000 now. So we've actually...
Ours is 2-story too.
Yeah.
But I think his is bigger.
He's got
it looks nicer.
His landscaping's really good. And he's got a pool out in the back.
Oh yeah, and he has a pool.
And an enclosed pool and everything. And I
Pool.
think he's got 2 garages instead of 1.
That's right. We only have one 2-car garage. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that
He's got 2 2-car garages.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
one thing that I
cars.
kind of liked better about our old house in
Yeah.
Sanford, which was smaller and was only 1 story,
Yeah.
but we had a 2-car garage and a separate 1-car garage.
Yeah.
Like this house, yeah, and that's where he kept the motorcycles
Yeah.
and the tools and stuff, and then we could keep the cars in the other one.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like this one just has a 2-car garage.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We could extend it, but...
yeah, it's,
You could take out a loan for it.
Nah, don't do that. It's not
Yeah,
that.
we'll probably just
It's not that important.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think when I was researching this show, I think that was the most surprising thing to me was that prior to the Civil War, at least in the United States, there did seem to be, and I'm sure like not all hospitals were like this. I'm certain all of them weren't. But this one in particular, and at least in the treatment of mental illnesses, it really did seem a lot more modern than I was expecting, like a lot more progressive than I was expecting, because they were basically like, they had rules against, you must never like hit them, you must never, punish them, you must never anything like that. They were like, they really tried to cultivate like compassion and respect for the people, like, because they thought that would help them get better. And it really did seem to, because like I said, a lot of the people didn't stay that long, and then they were let out and it was fine. So, and they gave them shit to do. Like I said, they had outdoor activities for them, and it was a nice it was a nice area. Like the building was nice and the landscaping was nice and everything like that. So like I said, most of the patients from in the 10 years between 1852 and 1862, about 40 to 50% of the patients were discharged in less than 6 months. And they think this can be partially attributed to, again, the treatment method they were using, which seemed to be very helpful. But it also could be because a large percentage of the people that were admitted for problems stemming from alcoholism, which was very rampant back then. So it really does seem like Dr. Reed in particular understood the relationship and was kind of one of the first doctors to do this, understood the relationship, how alcoholism could exacerbate already existing mental problems. And by getting people sober, essentially, it would help them with their other issues. So it could be that, you know, as they were in there and they weren't drinking and stuff like that, they kind of like felt better. So it could have been that as well. He did use some drugs too, but I don't know how extensive it was. You know, they didn't have the psychiatric drugs that we have nowadays, but they would use various tonics and sedatives and stuff like that. So it wasn't all kumbaya and like all organic and natural or anything. They did use drugs on people, but it wasn't, well, I don't think it was to the extent that it would be later on. Now, so, and one of the things too, and this was actually, I found online, and like I said, I think this was on the Gutenberg Project. I found a booklet from this hospital that was published in 1861, and it had all of the rules for employees. And, you know, a lot of it was just, and they had like all the different job titles and what their specific jobs were. But at the beginning, they had like just general rules for everybody that worked there. And most of it was just like regular ass shit, like don't look like a slob or whatever. You know, it didn't say it like that, but that's what they meant. But one of the rules, which I believe was number 6, actually, again, kind of surprised me. It said, and this is a quote, this is exactly what it said. In the management of patients, unvarying kindness must be strictly observed by all. When spoken to, mild, pleasant, and persuasive language must never give place to authoritative expressions of any kind. All threats, taunts, or other types of abuse in language are expressly forbidden. A blow, kick, or any other kind of physical abuse inflicted on a patient will be immediately followed by the dismissal of the person so offending. So, you know, whether this was always necessarily adhered to in practice, it is kind of nice that this was actually kind of codified in the rules. It just says right there, you have to be kind to them at all times. You can't yell at them. You can't abuse them at any time. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and that's from 1861. So that kind of blew my mind a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, because like I said, I had the Victorian era conception, I guess, of how they treated mentally ill patients, but that was after this. So like even before that it was better, but then like it got shitty like as time went on. So Dr. Reed was there for a few years. And then in 1856, he got fired. What ended up happening was that he was a Democrat, and then the Know Nothings came in, which if you're not from the U.S. was a political party. They're not around anymore, obviously, but it was a political party called the Know Nothings. And they came in and they elected a Republican governor whose name was J. Neely Johnson. And Johnson did not want Dr. Reed as the superintendent of this hospital anymore. So he appointed another doctor named Samuel Langdon to replace him. But the trustees of the asylum apparently really liked Dr. Reed and did not want him replaced, so they refused to remove him. They wouldn't take him out. At this point, the governor fired all the trustees because he was like, fuck you guys. And he just appointed a whole new board, which I guess you can do. Dr. Reed, who he seemed like kind of a badass, I guess, but he's just like, no, I'm not leaving. You know what I mean? He's like, you know, nobody wanted him to leave. He's like, even after they fired the trustees that didn't want to get rid of him, he's like, I'm not leaving. And they took him to court. And then at that point, the California Supreme Court said, no, you have to leave. So Dr. Langdon replaced him. One of the first things that Dr. Langdon did was start making a bunch of claims about Dr. Reed. Whether these have any truth to them, I don't know, because I have still seen articles nowadays that say that a lot of the stuff this went on at this hospital, but I'm not really sure how much of it was true and how much of it was just this guy coming in and shitting on his predecessor. You know what I'm saying? Because one of the first things, Dr. Langdon comes in as superintendent, and then he says, man, Dr. Reed subjected the patients to forced labor. He said they forced the patients to build his house because he lived on the grounds. Also, it's like, oh, a bunch of people died, and he tried to write it off like he underreported how many people had died there, and like, you know, swept everything under the carpet. And he also said that he just dumped a lot of people that died like into mass graves and like didn't report them. You know what I mean? Whether those allegations are true or not, I don't know.
That sounds like that'd be hard to do.
Yeah, so I don't know, but like I said, that was just the second superintendent that came in. You know, it was because of a political change, and you know, so whether Reed did those things, I don't really know. Because like I said, reading about Dr. Reed, he sounds like a cool dude and everything, but it's just kind of like you don't really know what was going on. And there might have been all kind of horrifying shit going on that they didn't like talk about. You know what I mean?
So a long time ago, maybe it's hard to pick through the propaganda.
And yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It's like I'm not saying that what Langdon said was true, but I'm not saying it was false either. I don't know. You know, it was a long time ago, so I don't really know what was going on. Now, they did take all of these charges to court eventually. And apparently there was a lot of bad blood, you know, as there would be, between Langdon and Reed. And this is so, oh my God, this is so 19th century, you guys. And what ended up happening was that I believe it was one of Reed's, it wasn't Reed himself, I don't think, but it was one of Reed's supporters, who was another doctor named Dr. Ryer. He challenged Langdon to a duel.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
I know you'd like that. Sounds like awesome.
I'd do that.
So they had a duel. 'Cause I think it was the Reed supporter that challenged to the duel. Please forgive me if I'm getting that wrong, but that's how I read it. So February 1857, rather, they have a duel. Now it wasn't as badass as you thought. Like, neither person was killed or anything like that. Dr. Langdon did get shot in the leg, though. Like, he got hit in the knee, but he recovered, so he was fine. As I said, they did take all the charges against Reed to court, but they were ultimately dismissed. And then it turned out that Dr. Langdon, who had taken over, he was only superintendent for about 6 months, and then he got canned. So there was that. After all of that, all that folderol, you know what I mean? So the next guy that comes in is named Dr. Aylett. And he made a bunch of changes too. Like, one of the things that he did was, because of the overcrowding issues, he hired a lot more people and he gave them more money, which I guess is kind of nice. And he added more occupational therapy type things and a lot more games. Like, he would do like dances and chess and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, in a way, just like to keep people occupied, keep them having a good time. You know what I mean? Keep their spirits up is what he was trying to do. So, which I thought that was kind of nice.
Keep their mind off of it.
Right. That's what I mean. And I think that's like a good idea, probably, just in general. So at this point, it's 1858, and there's about 220 patients, which again was a little over capacity. They bring in another superintendent, Dr. Tilden. He was also another moral treatment guy, so it seemed like, you know, everything went well with him as well. So there was that. But again, the overcrowding issue was getting worse and worse. 1862, they had 400 patients in the hospital, which was only designed for 250 patients. And at this point, they only had 19 attendants working at the hospital for 400 patients, which is obviously not ideal. Problem being, Dr. Tilden, you know, while his heart seemed in the right place, he didn't want to turn anyone away. Like, you know what I mean? So if anybody came with problems or something like that, he's like, yes, we have room for you and stuff. And obviously they didn't. Like, it was already overcrowded. So because he wouldn't turn anyone away, And I guess his, the attendants that worked there were horribly overworked because there were so many more patients than they could handle. There was a lot of conflict between Dr. Tilden and his employees. Like I said, because they were probably like really fucking overworked and whatnot. So what ended up happening with that was that the board of directors of the hospital, they actually, while Tilden was not there, even though I assume he was on the board of directors, one day when he wasn't there, they held an election and like kicked him out and put a different guy in there, whose name was Dr. Shirtliff. And Dr. Shirtliff actually was there for 18 years, and it doesn't really seem like anything super controversial happened during his watch. Now, as I mentioned, prior to the Civil War, it does seem like the moral treatment model was, I don't know if it was the majority of hospitals were doing this, but it did seem to be like a thing that they were doing. You know what I mean? It seemed to be kind of in the zeitgeist. And it did seem to be effective. Who could have thought like treating people like human beings would have good outcomes? But that's what they were doing. Their whole thing was, well, we don't want these people to be stuck in here. We want them to go back out into society. So we need to treat them like a person and like teach them to do shit and everything, like so they can get out of here like as quickly as possible. They didn't want to like keep them in there. You know what I mean? That was kind of the goal. And like I said, almost half of them were discharged within 6 months. But despite that, because of the population explosion and everything like that, they were constantly overcrowded, particularly the male ward. They had, like I said, a female ward too, but the male ward was usually, a lot more overcrowded. Now, they did expand the building. So they tried, but they just couldn't keep up. You know what I mean? They built 2 more wings that housed 325 patients, those 2 wings together. And then they had another wing that was like little cottages and stuff, and that had another 160 in it. But by late 1875, the population of the hospital was 1,500 patients, which was 500 over capacity. And the thing about it is that for whatever reason, and I'm sure there's like whole fucking papers written on this kind of shit, maybe. But after the Civil War, it really does seem like the treatment of the mentally ill started to go in a different direction. Prior to the Civil War, like I said, it was more like a moral treatment where, these people, we just want to treat them like human beings. We want to, teach them to do shit and get them back out in society as quickly as possible. But after the Civil War, it seemed like people stopped caring as much. They were just kind of like, look, we just want these people away from us. We just want them isolated. We want them contained. We don't really care how long they're in there, I guess. It just kind of went that way. Like, it almost seemed like apathy was taking over, or people just didn't want to deal with it anymore. It kind of seemed like, just in general, you know what I mean? In spite of this, it does seem like the Stockton State Hospital was still doing an okay job in that regard. In 1888, which, fun fact, was the same year that Jack the Ripper killed all those women. But there was this reporter from the San Francisco Examiner whose name was Frank, I guess it's Peltret or Peltray, I'm not really sure. Could be French. But like some later journalists did, got himself admitted to the hospital to see what it was like in there. And I read the article, like part of it. Like I couldn't get all of it but I found like an old scan of the article, which was kind of long, but a lot of it was cut off at the bottom. How he got himself admitted to the hospital was he went out to some lake or pond or something like that. And he, like, fully dressed, he goes in there and he's just out there, like, floating on his back, right? And he just lays there. And then, like, these people come by in a boat and be like, what the fuck? And they, like, fished him out of the pond or whatever. And they're like, what's your problem? And then he told them that his sister had committed suicide in this same pond and that he was going to join her, right? And when they took him to the hospital, like, to get sorted out, he tried to come up with, like, all of these stories about how he thought that his sister still lived at the bottom of the pond, like in this palace made out of pearls or some shit like that. So he was like coming up with some stuff to get himself admitted, essentially, is what he was doing. So the story that he came up with was kind of interesting. Was kind of interesting, but it worked. So the doctors were like, "Man, this bitch crazy." So they put him in there. Now, interestingly, Peltrat, I'm just gonna pronounce it like that. I'm not sure if that's right. He said when he first got there, he said now the first night he said was pretty bad. Like he couldn't sleep, and he compared it. And this is a quote. He said the atmosphere in the hospital was wild beasts confined in a menagerie. That's what he said. So like a bunch of people are running around screaming and shit like that. And he was in there for 2 or 3 weeks. But by the time that he left, he seemed to think the place was pretty okay. Like he didn't seem to see anything horribly egregious. He said that, and this is a quote too, "I found management far superior to what I expected. Considering its overcrowded conditions, I'm satisfied. The prejudice against insane asylums largely arise from garbled statements of patients, 9/10 of whom believe they are incarcerated wrongly, and that the doctors and attendants are part of a conspiracy against them."
Yeah, paranoid schizophrenia is what they're talking about.
So, yeah, so he didn't seem to experience anything bad, and his takeaway was that most of the abuses that people were talking about, like, because that was kind of in the, public discourse at the time, was that, oh, well, that's just people making stuff up, which I'm not sure if I agree with that totally, because like I said, some of the other hospitals that people checked themselves into had fucking horrifying conditions, which they took pictures of. But maybe this one was better. I'm not sure. I will note that in his article, he did admit that he witnessed what he called 2 incidents of cruelty, but he didn't say what those were, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Beat people up, probably.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, and that I was like, that could mean a lot of things. I was like, is that
restraining somebody?
Yeah, is that staff against patient? Is it patient against staff?
Right.
Is it patient against patient? There's really no way of knowing. Like he didn't really specify. I will note that they do have some letters from the archives of this place, and I'm not sure when these are from. I'm assuming they're from later. But one of the patients there had written letters to a relative, and they said that there was sexual abuse going on, for like that the workers encouraged so they could watch it. Like I said, I don't know if that's true, but that was apparently one patient. They do have some letters on file that a patient had written to someone on the outside, and they said that was going on.
They're getting crazy people to have sex with each other so they can watch it.
I imagine, like I said, it's like I don't know if that was going on in this place or not, but it does seem like that's a common thing that goes on in these types of institutions.
Well, the dudes are there working. They got all these crazy people running around. They're getting bored.
I mean, that's no fucking excuse.
They're probably having the male.
I would never get that bored.
The male and female inmates or patients are probably having sex with each other anyway.
Well, they were in different wards. They did try to keep them separate, but yeah.
They probably moved them together, though.
I mean, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So they didn't interact at all, huh? Probably couldn't trust them.
Well, I'm not really sure. I'm sure they interacted like during the day because they let them like outside, like in the yard and stuff. But they did have them. They were in separate buildings. They were in separate buildings.
Probably what they're talking about.
But who knows? You know what I mean? Who knows what was? And I'm not like.
And it's an inmate's making, or an inmate. It's a patient making this claim, probably, right?
Yeah, a patient did make this claim. Now I will note that in these same letters, this patient also claimed that he was being watched by wireless electric devices.
Okay, yeah, he's crazy.
So. I mean, like I said, make of that. That doesn't necessarily mean that the other shit wasn't going on too. But I'm just saying that
they can do that today. They couldn't do that back then.
Well, like I said, I'm not sure when those particular letters were from. I'm assuming that was from a later time period when there actually were. Well, there wasn't wireless stuff back then, but I mean, maybe.
Well, Tesla was working on wireless stuff.
Yeah, I mean, people kind of knew about it,
but there were no radio cameras,
right?
That could watch you back.
But so maybe he was.
He's talking about television.
Yeah.
You're watching.
I mean, this might have been 50s because this hospital was open until the 90s.
Okay.
It didn't close until 1996. Ben says a lot of people did get confined because their families or spouses wanted them out of the way. Oh yeah, big time. Big time. That happened a lot. And like I said, it just seemed like, we read you the list of stuff you could get put in the hospital for.
It's normal stuff, yeah.
And that's not even the whole list.
Yeah.
You know, some of the list was like just diseases you had, like I said, like, you know, like syphilis or something. But
I guarantee
all of those things, it's like that's everybody. Like everybody has one of those things.
Guarantee you though, if your family members are trying to get rid of you, you're some kind of problem child. At least they believe that you are. They probably do believe you're crazy. But in getting rid of you might allow them to get their hands on property.
That's kind of more probably.
Probably what. But
especially if it's like a wealthy family, they're like,
right.
here's this.
But
here's this bastard child that might inherit some shit. So let's just fob them off on
that. Might be part of it, but that person might have been also crazy too.
Oh yeah, both things could be true.
Yeah.
Both things could be true. But it could also be true that the person was completely normal and somebody just wanted them out of the way or didn't like what they were doing for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Because that did happen a lot too.
Well, their definition of what crazy was back then is going to be pretty different, I think.
Yeah, Tammy points like Rosemary Kennedy. Yeah. Rose Kennedy, yes.
Right.
That's pretty much what happened to her.
Right.
And Ben said there would have been a lot of gay men too, like gay people too.
Yeah.
Because they would have thought.
They would have thought that was crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. So yeah,
you'd have to be crazy to want to put that up in your booty. You crazy? Go ahead, lock him up. Yeah.
Tom talks about booty so much.
Yeah, well, that's what came to mind.
As much as he says he doesn't want it.
That's some crazy shit from my point of view.
As much as he says he doesn't want it,
that's some crazy
he
shit.
talks about it a lot.
That is some crazy shit.
He talks about it a lot.
Well, you had to be crazy.
I tease you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jen said they were doing shock treatment. Oh yeah, they absolutely were. And like I said, I don't think this is fucked up, but I don't think they thought of that in the same way that we think of it nowadays. You know what I mean? But yeah, so as we talked about earlier, like I kind of feel like, particularly after the Civil War, like in the late 19th century, Victorian era, you do get a lot of asylums that were, you know, notorious hellholes, right? I mean, they would chain patients to the walls. They would put them in cages. Like I said, they let them run around naked with shit on themselves. You know, the staff would beat the shit out of them. You know, they'd put them in straitjackets. They would restrain them for, you know, sometimes days at a time. And the thing about it was that I kind of feel like as time went on, you know, into the late 19th century and going into the early 20th century, it seemed like the focus shifted from let's help these people get better to let's just isolate them and contain them and keep them away from quote unquote normal people. You know what I mean? It just really did seem like
it's imprisonment.
And yeah, largely it seems like that's what they just like people didn't want to deal with it anymore. It seemed like because it was too hard, I guess. Or it's just like, or we don't know what's going on, so it's just like just put them over there. We just don't want to think about it anymore. So, and they didn't really seem to care all that much if people got abused and shit. And like I said, they started doing bloodletting, electroshock therapy, hydrotherapy, which kind of sounds nice, but it's not as nice as it sounds. They were doing that a lot, and they did this at the Stockton Hospital too, and they also did electroshock therapy there as well. I'm not sure about bloodletting, but they for sure did electroshock therapy and hydrotherapy. And I think they did lobotomies and sterilization as well.
We can look down our noses at these treatments. I guarantee you 100 years from now, they will look down their noses on us at what we're doing.
Well, yeah, that's just the way that's the way shit works.
Right.
I mean, I hope they do.
I don't trust them.
Well, no, I mean, I hope they do, because that means we've gotten better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, look, they can repair damage. They can do transplants. They can do surgeries and shit. The drugs angles, I don't trust it anymore, because what they do is they want to sell you drugs that they have patents on so they can get big commissions. So look, we're not going to give them morphine, okay, because we don't own a patent on morphine to deaden pain. We're going to give them this new thing here that's fucking, you know, we can make money on. It's a lot stronger than morphine, and it might be highly addictive, but we're going to use that because we have a patent on it. That shit's crooked. Okay?
Well, yeah.
That shit's very crooked. There's a lot of things that can be solved by fucking, and in men's problems, by injecting testosterone. That solves a lot of problems. But no, they want to sell you other shit because they have patents on that. The patents on fucking testosterone and anthate ran up fucking 50 years ago. Okay, so they can't make money on that. So it's an industry. It's a fucking industry. All right, and there needs to be reform in the medical industry, big time. I don't trust them.
Well, anytime they're more concerned with
corporations.
how much money they're going to make than actually
right.
fixing your problem,
right?
Then obviously
they'll go out and spend billions of dollars to engineer a new drug to replace an old drug because they lost the patent on that.
Well,
and that other one, that worked.
It was fine.
That was fine. It worked. That was a better way of doing it. But now they're not going to do that now
because they can't sell it. They can't sell it
for right.
Like now it's free or super cheap.
And they're going to try to chisel the government into paying for it through fucking state health care type bullshit. And then they're going to get in cahoots with the insurance agencies. No, it needs to be medicine needs to be science. It needs to be okay, you should pay people for their for helping you, but it can't be a racket. All right. And that's
there shouldn't be that incentive.
Yeah. It's in American history, it's been a racket the entire 200
Well, and honestly,
years.
I kind of feel like that's why I've never liked the American healthcare system, because it's a for-profit system.
Yeah. Right.
A lot of the European systems are way better in that regard. Not perfect, obviously, but they don't have the same financial incentive that they have in the United States, so they have less of that, less egregious, kind of.
And the drug industries have all the fucking power here. They can get if a doctor says, no, I'm not going to treat my patient with that drug, I don't trust that drug, they'll yank his fucking medical license. So a doctor can't practice. It's on the doctor. It's on your doctor to fucking treat you, not these corporations.
You just need a good fucking doctor that's gonna
that knows
fucking stand up for you. Some doctors are like that, but some are just in it for the money. You don't really know.
They're gonna do what they're told. They're gonna issue you the brand new fucking expensive drug because they're all gonna get kickbacks on it. They're getting commissions on it.
I mean, honestly, I'm just kind of I generally don't have insurance anyway, but luckily for me, and hopefully I'm not jinxing myself, I don't get sick very often, and I haven't had a lot of health problems in my life, so I tend to avoid going to not only because I can't afford it, because I can't, but just because it's just like, well, they'll find a bunch of niggling little problems that I can probably live with, you know what I mean, that I don't really need to sort out or anything.
Yeah, they're gonna make money off you on these.
I mean, so I have to be really, really, really sick before I'll even consider going to a doctor.
She takes care of her body though now. She works out a lot. She's getting
even before I did that. I very, very rarely get, and I can't remember my whole entire life. I can never remember being so sick, for example, that I couldn't get out of bed. Not my whole life. Not my whole 52 years.
The best advice.
Hopefully I'm not jinxing
The best
myself.
advice comes from the BC era. They had a damn fucking Greek philosopher who was like an early scientist, said, eat good quality food, get plenty of sleep, work out, get a lot of fresh air and a lot of sunlight. Fucking,
I mean, but like I said, obviously that's good. People should do that. That'll help. But that's not going to help everybody, because some people obviously have genetic proclivities.
Yeah,
I just kind of got lucky because my genetics are, even my mom said that too. She's like, well, you have really good genes. So it's like, because she has that too. So it's just kind of like, she never got sick.
Yeah.
We just never get sick. And it's just kind of like, we just lucked out in that regard, but not everybody has that privilege. Yeah. You know what I mean? So not everybody can, so that's why I don't really like to say it about people. It's, oh, well, just eat good and exercise and everything will be fine. No, it won't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I had a 32-year-old uncle who was completely healthy and ate good and exercised and everything like that, and he died of fucking brain cancer when he was 32. Yeah. It was shit luck. It was shit luck, and it happens. And we've had friends that had that too.
Yeah, beautiful young girls dead of cancer by the time they're 30-something.
Yeah,
brain cancer, brain tumors. It's fucking weird.
Yeah, and like nothing, and they weren't unhealthy. They weren't nothing like that.
It makes you wonder how much of that shit was artificially induced by the environment and food and drugs.
Well, like I said, it's hard to tell because everything is just so complicated.
We don't know yet. We don't have the technology to know.
Right.
My dad's side, they all died young. My granddad died in his 40s from some kind of heart defect. They don't know what it was. He just died of a heart attack. My dad died at 77 of a lot of shit. You guys were here with me for that. But my mother's side of the family, they're fucking immortal. Yeah, my grandparents died recently. They lived almost to 100.
Yeah, my grandmother just died.
Yeah.
Like a few months ago.
And they were spry all the way up until they died. It's funny because they hit 70 and they didn't seem to age between 70 and 90 something or other. They seemed to be about the same. It's like you get to a certain age and you don't age anymore visibly. Weird.
Yeah, I've kind of seen that happen.
Yeah, you can't. I couldn't tell the difference between a 70-year-old and a 90-year-old. Yeah, they look the same.
But
Black hair. And all her older sisters are still alive, and they're in their 80s, I think. The oldest one, I think, is in her
like
80s.
I said, my maternal grandmother
They're
just
immortal.
died. And she was in her 90s. She was 96, 97, something like that.
Evil never dies. All bad brains on my mother's side of the family, all fucking wicked.
Well, hey, my grandma was awesome. She was like the nicest person ever. So that's not true across the board. And she lived till she was 96
my
or 97.
mother's side of the family were all evil. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he likes to say that because, that's not always the case, though.
Yeah, kind of.
But I can see why you say that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I just try to avoid, like I said, I have to be really, really, really in distress before I'll even think about it. And even then, I probably won't do it because I'll be like, the money. You know what I mean? I just don't want to do it. Don't want to do it. And luckily, so far, I have not had to. I can count on one hand the times that I've actually had to go to the emergency room. How many times have I had to go to the emergency room my whole entire life? 3 times, 4 times, maybe. Never stayed overnight. Never had to. And most of the time, like one time it was because I thought I broke my ankle because I fell off the stairs. It wasn't broken. It just was like sprained really bad. I just had a cast on it. But yeah, I've hardly ever had to go. And I'm just, like I said, knock on laptop that never fucking happens. That's, but who knows? Shit happens. But so I kind of feel like the whole thing where it's kind of shitty because it's kind of like one of those instances where they had the good idea like a long time ago and then all of a sudden like shitty ideas took over and then they didn't have good idea again until like decades, almost like a century later. Because it felt like in the first part of the 19th century they kind of were on the right track, like as far as treating mental illness. But then after that, they're like, just fuck it. Just treat them like prisoners and torture them and charge people to come see them and laugh at them and shit like that. I mean, they were doing that. Like, I don't know if it was so much in the U.S., but in England for sure they were. They would charge like snooty people to come and look at the crazy people, and they're just like, look at all this, look at, they're naked and shit like that. So yeah, the shit that they would look at back then. Like I said, I don't know. I didn't live back then, so it's like I don't know what I would have been like. But it's like I have a hard time thinking. It's like I don't think I'll ever be that bored. That it's like, hey, let's go down and pay $25 to like go see somebody get tortured. Awesome. Like, no thanks.
Casey Lee's talking about his crazy psych doctor got him hooked on Klonopin. Yeah, Klonopin's fucked up. A woman lived across the hall from me. I was living in Boston. She was a mental health care professional dealing with outpatients, and she got hooked on Klonopin. She laid around like a damn drug addict when she wasn't working. That was a weird situation. I forgot what her name was.
I mean, I'll just drink booze.
Yeah.
That's pretty much my only thing.
Klonopin. She said it was the worst decision of his life. That shit. Yeah, don't do it.
Yeah, I'm just not...
They're professional drug dealers.
I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons. It's like I have problems, and I've told Tom, it's like, look, I have problems with anxiety and depression and shit like that, but it's just kind of like I'm never going to go and get that seen to, because they're just going to put me on drugs, and I don't want to be on drugs.
Yeah.
I'll just, like I said, I'll just drink and try to handle it, like, I don't drink all the time, but I'll just, like, try to kind of handle it, you know what I mean? Because that's just kind of what I do. I've always had to do that.
I had PTSD, they put me on Paxil for a couple months.
Yeah, that's right.
And fucking, after a while, I was like, oh, no, I gotta get off of this shit.
Yeah, he didn't like it.
I didn't like that shit at all.
I didn't know you then, but you told me about it.
I didn't like that shit at all. I don't believe in any of that shit. And it wasn't helping.
Well, you said it completely just numbed your emotions.
It's like a damn...
Like all of your emotions.
Yeah, all of them. And fucking sex was boring, and fucking you were just... I was like, no, I can't live like it. It was kind of like a lobotomy.
Like it sucked all the joy out of your life.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't feel bad things, but you couldn't feel good things either.
Yeah, I didn't like it at all. And
I wouldn't
feeling
like
like
that.
I was constantly falling.
I wouldn't
falling
like that.
5 feet and then falling. It was coming off of it was fucking rough, man. There was withdrawal symptoms and everything. I don't trust them because I've never had a good experience with them. Now being injured and being patched up, yeah, they're good at that. It's just that there's a whole industry trying to get you hooked on things that cost money, and they make a lot of money off of it. Even though it might be the federal government, in my case, because I'm VA, the federal government's paying for it, so the taxpayer's paying for it. I don't have to pay for it, but they're making money on it.
Yeah.
All right? And it's not helping me. So, no, it's better to just, if you're under stress, just face it. Deal with it. It'll pass. You'll get tougher.
I mean, that's kind of what I just try to talk myself out of shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Situational anxiety and shit.
Because I have that bad, but it's just yeah. I just kind of lay there and be like, is this really as bad as I'm thinking?
Yeah.
It's like this.
Yeah,
So I just kind of try to talk myself out of it.
Yeah, those drugs will be even worse.
Yeah. So that's why, because it's just like, it's bad, but it's like that would be worse. I think I don't really want to go down that road.
And then once I was on that shit, after a couple of weeks, I was like, man, all those fucking sci-fi movies like Logan's Run and fucking Brave New World, all that shit's true, man. They try to get you on. I'm getting off of this. I don't need Soma or whatever it is.
Well, because the thing that I wouldn't like is that even though I'm like a constant ball of anxiety and overthinking at all times, but it's like if I wasn't like that, I would never get anything done.
Yeah.
And I like getting shit done.
Yeah.
I like making my videos. I like writing my books. I like accomplishing things. I like making things. I like designing games. I like doing that. And if I was on some drug that just made me like zone out all the time, I would never do anything. And it's like that would make me feel like shit.
The one it actually reminded me of was George Lucas's first movie, THX 1138, where they were just constantly on drugs, and you could go to jail for drug evasion for not taking
taking it.
And go watch that movie. If you've ever seen THX 1138, it's a fucking masterpiece. Before Star Wars, and it's just a fucking dry, spooky, futuristic, dystopian movie about a fucking just. And when you look at the statistics, man, fucking like half Americans are on these things now, and you wonder why they can't drive. You're in driving
I would
traffic.
just be scared
These
to
bitches
be
can't
on.
fucking drive. They're all fucking on these serotonin reuptake inhibitors. It's like something out of THX 1138. They all got lobotomies.
Case and Lee said, Tom, it ruined my gut. I'm skin and bones now. And then Xanada said, I was hooked on Xanax. Had to go into inpatient to get off. The withdrawal is as bad as heroin.
Yeah.
Cold sweats, can't sleep, shaking. I replaced benzos with marijuana edibles.
Yeah.
Similar feeling without the risk of killing myself on accident. Yeah, I kind of feel like a lot of people did transition to that because, well, and I'm glad that they legalized weed most of the time, because most of the people that I know that had mental health problems that were on various pharmaceuticals, like once weed was legalized and you could get it and stuff like that, they were like, okay, I'm just gonna go on that. It's like much cheaper and it's much less harmful.
Only drugs I like alcohol. I'm not big into weed. I love LSD.
Yeah.
Very therapeutic for PTSD type guys. A lot of veterans take it. They're experimenting with veterans too to like alleviate fucking stress and to
okay, I could be down with that.
Introspection and shit.
I like LSD.
Yeah, LSD's fucking great. And then testosterone if you're a male. Testosterone. You'll feel a lot better, especially as you get older. But a lot of guys that are in the special operations community, when they come home and they end up being in the VA, like me and fucking Murder Hornet, fucking you're in the VA system, you got PTSD. Testosterone's the best thing to give those guys. Because we live on a fucking adrenaline high and a nice masculine high. And when the testosterone goes, you're at risk for fucking suicide. So dudes do much better on testosterone.
Well, like I said,
after
I saw a massive difference in how you were. Like your attitude was so much more positive. You were a lot more energetic. You
could sleep better.
Yeah. Like prior to that, prior to you going on that, you would say shit to me sometimes. You had a lot of nightmares. You used to have constant nightmares. He was always like yelling in his sleep and talking in his sleep and fighting people in his sleep. Yeah. And he was doing that kind of shit. And then like he would say shit like,
I'm gonna die.
I'm gonna die.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be here much longer. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? You're like in your 40s.
I felt like I was dying.
Right. And it's like he would say shit like that. I'm like, you're young still.
It's called andropause. It's male
Yeah.
menopause.
And he was just going through, and I didn't know what was going on.
That's why dudes die so early. We're designed to fucking after 40 to just shut down and die and get out of here. You're fucking useless.
Because it's like you probably already spread your seeds, so
you've already procreated.
piss off.
Time for you to go. Right. And so
we don't need you anymore.
Yeah, the younger ones are going to replace you. So no, just inject testosterone. You'll fucking come right back. Look at me, man. Look at me.
Well, and like I said, not just that. You not only look a lot better, but you like are a lot. Yeah, you feel a lot better. You're a lot more energetic.
I'm 55. I feel like I'm 35. I feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. And I like the shit too.
Yeah.
I don't think it had as much of a
not on a woman, not as much.
Yeah, it didn't have as much of a drastic effect on me as it did on you.
Women did not get androgenized during puberty on testosterone, so you weren't rewired for it. Guys are wired for that.
Yeah.
Women, there's other things they can do. Primobolan, a little bit of test.
Yeah, I mean that's
a little bit of nandrolone after menopause will help them fight osteoporosis, and this has been known for a long, long time. And the medical industry doesn't want to talk about that because they lost the patents on all that.
Yeah.
So they're going to try to come up with another miracle cure that doesn't infringe on the prior patents. See? It's a scam. Yeah. It's a scam. There's a lot of good shit out there that you can use. And you can get it now because of the internet. Cryptocurrency. Shit like that.
Mole FCD Pillow Biter says, "Great show tonight, Jenny and Tom. Way to stay on topic. We never do.
We're never on fucking topic. Man.
I mean, we kind of are like next to the topic.
Yeah.
Or maybe 2 doors down from the topic. Yeah. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. Yeah. So Ben says, "I'm boring. I drink a little socially or to relax. That's it." Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much all we do too.
Yeah.
I like to drink, but I don't take a lot of drugs. But I mean, drugs, that's like a special occasion thing. But yeah, so what I was talking about?
Yeah, before we go on, getting back on topic, making fun of us for getting off topic. Shit, we haven't had super chats either, so with no super chats, we can get off topic. Okay, go ahead.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom actually. Okay. Now that you've.
Yeah, so we're gonna give her a break. This is halftime break.
Yeah, even though we're more than halfway through.
We're more than halfway through this. Let's see what everybody's doing. What you laughing at? Jen's talking about psilocybin. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Jen says she has a pee too. Go ahead, Jen. You go ahead and step off and go to pee. Murder Hornet's asking for Ambien. Murder Hornet says, Tom's right. We get out of the Army, you're still addicted to the adrenaline. It's like a drug, exactly. So you have to kind of create your own adrenaline, right? Like what do you say? I like start picking bar fights to get that adrenaline rush back. Yeah, you become violence prone. So it's kind of the same thing. That's like I said. If I was go back in time, I could have saved Elvis. All right, because if you looked at what happened to Elvis fucking fell off stage or hurt his leg. So then they put him on opiates, the fucking painkillers. And he got addicted to those painkillers. And then all of a sudden he goes downhill real quick. And it's because those painkillers suppressed his natural testosterone production. So he started putting on a bunch of weight and getting depressed. And then taking more and more painkillers to fight his depression. All you had to do was fucking take if I was there, I'd have said fucking King. Because I'd be able to hang out with Elvis. We're both Mississippi boys. I'd fucking be part of his mafia, probably trading 1911s with him and shit, 45s. I just would have jacked fucking Elvis up on test. And fucking he would have lost a bunch of weight, felt a lot better, and made a comeback tour. And fucking he would have been badass in his 40s on test. Okay? And he could have lasted into his 60s or 70s putting on a good show. As fucking Elvis Presley. Elvis motherfucking Presley. And I would have got him out from underneath Colonel Parker, too.
Yeah, that was a bad situation.
That was a bad situation, but... Oh, we got a super chat.
Thank you, Ben.
Hey,
Stay on target.
Stay on target. Yeah. We're going
Stay
down
on target.
We're
Stay
going
on
down,
target.
Going down the Death Star trench.
It didn't go in.
Getting a lot of flak from those flak towers. Angle your deflector.
We knew exactly what you were talking about. Isn't that funny?
It didn't go in. It just impacted on the surface.
I love his defeat in his way. It didn't go in.
It didn't go in.
Ah.
Just impacted on the surface.
God damn it.
It's the same thing that happened in Top Gun 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about that in our Top Gun 2 review. I'm like, this is essentially Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah.
But in plane.
That was a fun movie,
like
though.
on this planet.
It's a fun movie.
I kind of wish they'd, I don't know. I guess they should have acknowledged it. But I guess everybody noticed it, not just us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Murderhart points out that fucking Elvis would shoot the TV. Yeah, well, they talk bad about him. He'd shoot the TV. He'd just have another TV bought for him anyway.
Yeah, he didn't care.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. You have that much money. You can just be like, fuck the TV. Like, now I'm just like, don't shoot the TV. Now we gotta, like, buy another one. That's hundreds of dollars. Jesus Christ. Kason Lee said, I tried suicide. Took 20 milligrams of, it's Klonopin, right?
Klonopin, yeah.
Yeah. 20 pills with a bottle of wine. Hoped I'd overdosed and get out of here in my sleep, but my luck was so bad.
Didn't get you.
It did nothing.
Man,
that's fucked up. That's fucked up. I mean, I'm glad you're still here.
Yeah.
Ira says sometimes going a bit off topic helps, but you're kind of still on the subject.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're still kind of talking about drugs, you know what I mean, which is kind of like a mental health thing. But one thing I wanted to say was that one of the things that they did, other than electroshock therapy, which I kind of feel like most people know about, and lobotomies, which a lot of people know about, was hydrotherapy, which, like I said, sounds kind of nice until you kind of look at what it actually was. So what they did in hydrotherapy, and they did this at this hospital too, was they'd basically wrap you up like a mummy, like in wet cloth, and they'd put you in a bath like for days and days, or they'd put you under a shower that just like continuously ran. You know what I mean? Like for a long time. Like we're not just talking about, hey, I'm in there for 10, 20 minutes or whatever. They were just like constantly like putting, and like I said, sometimes they'd wrap you up like a mummy. It's just like waterboarding, essentially, was kind of what it was. And then and sometimes they'd strap you in the tub, and then they'd put like a canvas sheet over the tub, and only your head was sticking out. So then you'd just be in there for hours and hours, or sometimes days and days. They would like leave you in there because they thought that the water was going to cure you somehow. And when I was looking up hydrotherapy, like I found this thing about Psychiatry Today that was talking about all these crazy treatments that they used to do. And they said that the whole hydrotherapy thing was actually like a kinder, gentler version of what they used to call, this made me laugh, I hate to say, what they used to call the bath of surprise, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically, you would take the patient and you would very suddenly, when they weren't expecting it, hence the surprise, plunge them into ice cold water because they thought that would help you, shock the mental illness out of you. Who knows?
Yeah, only a Victorian would cope with that shit.
The bath of
shock
surprise.
the crazy out of his ass. Yeah.
Please tell me there's a band called the Bath of Surprise also.
Yeah.
Surprise! Yeah. I don't want that kind of surprise. No thanks. But yeah, so hydrotherapy was like a slightly less fucked up version of that.
Yeah, Ben says that's called waterboarding now.
But yeah, that's what I mean. It's essentially waterboarding is what they were doing. They would like wrap you up in cloths and stuff. We're just gonna keep pouring water on you. Water fixes everything, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, they were totally doing that at this. But this was a very common treatment in this era. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hydrotherapy. Like I said, it sounds nice. It sounds innocuous, but it's totally not. Now, so Stockton in particular, they were doing all this shit, although they still seem to be on the moral treatment train, even though a lot of hospitals had kind of gone the other way. Just like, we'll just lock them up, whatever. What they did do in 1905, they got 1,000 acres of farmland. And then, so they were going to, like, the patients that were there would, like, essentially, like, work on the farm. They would raise animals and grow vegetables and, stuff like that. Because I guess the supervisors thought, well, it's win-win because the patients are getting outdoor time, they're doing something productive, but also the hospital is partially self-sustaining because we're growing all of our own food, which they were for a little while. Whether this was forced labor or not entirely sure. I don't know if they were just making everybody do it, whether they wanted to or not. They're like, hey, you're going to go out there and fucking milk those cows. I don't really know. So you could argue that maybe that was forced labor. I don't know. But they did have 1,000 acres of farmland. Now, they had this superintendent named Margaret Smythe. And she was actually the superintendent for a long time, from 1929 to 1946. Now, because she really did not... And it was about around this time period where it was becoming a little bit less socially acceptable to use the words insane and asylum. So she wanted to change the name. So at this point, she did change the name to Stockton State Hospital. Now, she was actually recognized, interestingly, as I believe she was the first female superintendent of a state hospital. I believe in the country. She might have been. However, don't get too excited because in 1938, there was an interview with her in a magazine somewhere, and she was bragging about how their pioneering sterilization program, how that was all the rage in Germany these days.
A sterilization program?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That they had at the hospital.
Well, they gotta keep these crazy people from fucking reproducing.
Yeah. So, like I said, I kind of feel like, I don't want to single out this particular hospital because a lot of mental hospitals were doing this, so maybe all of them. I kind of feel like that was almost, during this era, it was just kind of what you did.
Yeah.
They were like, well, obviously this person has problems, and so they shouldn't be breeding. And so they would sterilize them, like, against their will.
Kids, and you don't want to pass those genes down. That's what they were thinking. At the same time, there was a big eugenics program going on in a lot of the states of the United States. Yeah,
it was kind of a big thing around this time period.
Yeah, where, and it makes sense. I mean, because a lot of the eugenics kind of came from the Mormons. Mormon data. The Mormon data said you could breed disease out of families because they had all these meticulous birth records.
Yeah, it's surprising how much of this shit came from the Mormons.
The Mormons were
just because of their record keeping.
Yeah,
I know it's weird to say, but that's actually true.
And then in the rest of the United States, especially in the more rural states, most people were farmers, so they knew all about breeding animals. You could breed better cows and pigs and have a whole livestock show. Now, who made the fucking biggest pig and the best pig? Well, that evolved into what was called beauty pageants, which is who has the most beautiful daughter.
Look at my genes.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. Because they bred humans too. Farmers knew about breeding.
Yeah.
And later on, Mustache Man and the Germans of the Bent Cross picked up this data and took it back to Germany.
We came up with that shit.
Yeah. Mustache Man was actually copying what was happening in the United
Ben
States.
just said that.
Yeah, they're copying what was happening in the United
Eugenics
States.
was born in the American medical system. Germany imported it from them. Yeah, we were doing that shit before.
Now Germany,
they're like, hey, good idea.
Germany politicized it and racialized it. Okay, which is not really what the technology was about. The technology was about building the best animals and the best humans. All right, it works. Hell yeah, it works. That's what genetic engineering. That's why they want it. Doesn't necessarily mean that. You know what I mean? Fucking, there's only one kind of people. You could be breeding the best white people, the best black people, the best Indian people. Everybody's doing it. It's called mate selection. You're trying to get the best woman you can get. The women are trying to get the best man they can get. So it's happening naturally. But some of these farming communities were conscious of it. I'm going to marry that girl, and our children's going to be beautiful. Look, we'll even have a competition. That's all it is.
The weird thing about it is that sometimes, and I don't want to say this is a general rule, but sometimes you see, like, parents that are really not that good looking, and sometimes they will have a ridiculously good looking kid.
Yeah, well, beauty is kind of something that's kind of difficult to predict, but you can predict eye color, hair color, skin color, shape, face shape. Here's another thing, though, is sometimes little kids are born and they're not good looking as little kids, but then they grow up as adults, they're real good looking.
Right.
And then sometimes it's the opposite. You'll have a real good looking little kid, but they grow up
And then they kind of grow up and they're like, nah.
ugly, yeah. Because sometimes what looks beautiful on a kid, that doesn't translate to an adult when it grows, and vice versa. You know what I mean? You look at a kid, and the kid's kind of fucking homely looking, but then it's a supermodel when it's an adult. You know, it's just you can't tell. But they do look like the parents.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, usually it's a synthesis of the parents.
But the thing about it is that I think that's kind of why, yeah, you can predict some shit to some degree, but shit's like so complicated and there's so many mitigating factors that you're never going to be entirely sure what you're going to get in the end. Like, you can stack the deck in your favor, sure, but that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get like the best results at the end.
My family's from Mississippi. Mississippi is the blackest state in the union. It's like 33% African American. And weird shit happens with them. Like, you'll have a black woman and her husband will kind of accuse her. Maybe she slept with a white guy because the kid comes out white.
Or whitish.
Yeah, and blue eyes, real light skin. And the dude's like, what the fuck, I want a DNA test. And it comes back that, no, he is the father.
Right.
So sometimes there's genetic throwbacks that happen because in Mississippi, there's almost every black person in Mississippi has some white ancestry.
And vice versa. Yeah,
there's always a little bit of African influence in the white people of the South, usually, unless they move there later. But so sometimes it's not what it appears to be. There's one set of where I think it's black parents that had twin girls, and one of them is Caucasian.
Yeah, I remember that case.
Yeah, she's blonde hair, blue eyes.
Yeah.
She looks Caucasian as hell.
Genetics
looks like
is weird,
straight
y'all.
from Germany. And her twin is black, and both parents are black. They do a DNA test, and no, that is their child.
Yep.
It's just that there's a genetic throwback to Caucasian, to
so like
European ancestry.
You can't predict.
Yeah.
Like I said, you can stack the deck in your favor.
Yeah.
You can be like, yeah, I want this, that, and the other thing, or you can look. You know, it's not in a eugenics way, but it's just like in a choosing a mate kind of way. If you want to be that mercenary about it, you can do that. But it's just kind of like you never know what you're gonna get as an end product.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how much of your genes and how much of their genes. You don't know what's in there that you can't see, what's in your genes that you can't see that's going to pop out at you.
Statistically, it's going to go towards whatever the genetic weight is, whatever the weight of the ancestry. If most of your ancestors are white, you're mostly going to be white kids.
Yeah.
That's it's called genetic weight.
But the weird thing about it, like my family, my mom is, has brownish kind of hair. She has brown eyes. My dad has black hair, also brown eyes. I ended up with really dark brown eyes, almost black, and red hair.
Yeah.
None of my siblings have red hair. One of my brothers and sisters has brown hair, and my youngest brother has black hair, like my dad. But I ended up with red hair and black eyebrows.
Yeah.
Which, who knows? Now, I do have some cousins that have red hair, but nobody else in my immediate family has red hair. So I was the one that ended up with red hair. I don't know how that happened.
My dad's side of the family is all gingers, all Irish gingers.
Yeah, I ended up like super red hair. But like I said, I obviously shaved my eyebrows off, but my eyebrows naturally are black.
Yeah, my dad's side's all gingers. My mother's side, Germans, English, and my grandfather on her side was, one half Assyrian. His mother was an Assyrian Christian. So I have some Iraqi or Middle Eastern influence. Be 1/8 Middle Eastern, which I don't think of myself like that, but that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see myself as just a white guy.
Jeffy Art said, "Look at the actor who played Neville from the Harry Potter series." Yeah, I was thinking of that guy too. He started out pudgy and awkward to a heartthrob. Yeah, he was like real. They cast him in the early Harry Potter movies when they were all kids, because he looked like the Neville character from the book. He was kind of chunky. He had like buck teeth. He looked like a little fat dork is what he looked like. But then when he got older, he got super hot.
Anthony
And
Michael
you would
Hall.
never know that. Yeah, exactly.
Anthony Michael
There's
Hall
another
was
one.
kind of a dorky looking kid.
Yeah, he played a nerd like in every 80s horror movie.
Yeah, he grew up to be a hunk.
Yeah. So it does happen.
Yeah.
It does happen. Sometimes. Xanada said green eyes are a recessive gene. Yes, that's true. They are.
I have them, though.
Yeah, Tom's eyes are green.
Yeah.
I'm the only person in my family with green eyes, but they had to come from somewhere. Yeah, that's true. Like I said, mine are very dark brown, but my whole family has brown eyes. So we didn't get any mixed up shit in there. Other than, like, my dad's side of the family, I think some of them have blue eyes, but we didn't get it. Because blue eyes are a recessive gene, too. But yeah, so, okay, where was I? All right, so we were talking about hydrotherapy. We were talking about eugenics. We're talking about all that kind of stuff. So they were doing sterilization at this hospital. And they were not ashamed of it because they were talking about it as late as 1938 and probably later than that, I would imagine. Like I said, I don't think that was a gauche thing to talk about at this era because that was like the cutting edge of science or whatever. So like, yeah, we're sterilizing the crazy people so they don't reproduce. So it was that kind of stuff. So that was going on there. Now, when the hospital was 100 years old in 1953, they were doing all the shit that most of the other mental hospitals were doing at the time. Like I said, they were doing frontal lobotomies, they were doing electroshock therapy, all that kind of, like, sterilization, hydrotherapy, all that kind of stuff. At that point, they had 4,600 patients. Now, right around the mid to late 1950s, that was when the first antipsychotic medications started coming on the market. And this kind of changed the whole framework of how mental illness was approached, I feel like. Now, in 1956, the hospital had the most patients that it ever had, which was 4,878 patients. That's the most that it ever had. And they did actually try to expand it some. They tore down some of the old buildings, built new ones, stuff like that. They phased out the farm kind of thing and everything. But the thing about it was that after antipsychotic medications had started coming on the market and it started becoming more acceptable, more used in the medical community, things started shifting from the institutional model of, you know, keeping people with mental illness confined in hospitals to, well, let's just give them these drugs and do, like, outpatient type of stuff. Like, it was kind of a slow transition, but it did kind of start happening. But it's like in the late 1950s to early 1960s, I want to say. So they started pushing for more what they call community-based stuff, where they're like, well, we have all these drugs. If somebody is responding well to these drugs and can function in society, they don't need to be confined in these institutions, so we can just put them on these medications and send them out to live a normal life. How successful that's been, I'm not entirely sure. But, you know, I think, like, Thorazine was kind of the first big one. And a lot of doctors at the time were kind of like, well, this is going to calm people down, and then we can let them out. You know what I mean? Like, we'll just put them on that, and everything will be fine. So we'll just keep them on an outpatient basis. We don't have to, like, keep them... Which, like I said, on its face kind of sounds good because, like, you don't want to keep people confined if they don't need to be. But I don't know. I kind of feel like it was a double-edged sword in some ways because there was a lot of unintended consequences. What ended up happening was that, particularly in California, you know, between 1967 and 1975, rather, you know, Ronald Reagan was governor, and he was kind of pushing for laws that would go to a more community-based model in the sense that it's like, well, we want to get rid of these mental hospitals and just put these people on drugs and, like, let them out. And like I said, on its face, that sounds good, but in the long term, that really didn't seem to work out that well because I feel like it contributed a lot to, like, the homeless problem because now there were all these people out in the streets that were on these drugs and maybe they weren't reacting that well to them and couldn't really integrate back into society. So it kind of didn't work out as well as they were hoping, I guess. So the hospital stayed open for a while, but like I said, 1956 was its peak as far as how many patients they had. And over the decades, it kind of started declining because of, outpatient programs and drugs and things like that. So basically, the hospital ended up closing for good in 1996. Now, the site is still in use, but it's now part of the Stockton campus of California State University. It's Stanislaus. Now, I think a lot of people became aware of this hospital in 2005, because in 2005, a lot of articles came out talking about the discovery of 30 bodies on the grounds of what was once the hospital. And these bodies were determined to be former patients of this state hospital. So they not only found the remains of 30 people, they also found like a bunch of coffins and some particular kind of square-headed nails that date back to the 19th century, at least according to the archaeologists. Now, according to this news article that I found, or that Jennifer sent me, they believe that as many as 4,200 patients of this one hospital were buried in unmarked or mass graves. So like I said, we might be going back to that whole thing where the first superintendent, Dr. Reed, because you remember when the second superintendent came in, it was like, oh, this dude is just like throwing people in holes and like not identifying them. People are dying and he's just throwing them in mass graves. Maybe that wasn't as untrue as we thought. You know what I mean? Maybe he was doing that.
To do a mass grave thing, that means you have a lot of people dying around the same time, within days. And man, how many people are going to die per day in a place like this? There's only 1,000 inmates, right?
Right.
No.
Well, over the years, it would be over the years.
Okay, so
obviously.
Mass grave is an overstatement. Mass graves when you got to fucking bury 100 people a day into a single pit.
Yeah.
They might just be disposing of dead people in the same area. Just dig
it might have been something which sounds
no casket, nothing
fucked up, but I think they
did that.
The sad thing is that it could be that during the era that we're talking about, a lot of the people that were in the hospital maybe didn't have any relatives.
Yeah, they're indigent.
Or
they don't have any money
so when they died,
they just buried them in a
they
ground
didn't
right
really
there.
know what to do with them.
Yeah.
So they're basically like, well, we'll just put them in this burial pit that we have and they don't have. I mean, it would have been nice if they'd at least like put a little marker with their name and shit, because they didn't even do that. But
no, because there'd be nobody to come and mourn or did it.
That's kind of sad.
So probably what they're talking about is unmarked graves, and they're probably burying them in the same spot.
Well, yeah, that's what they found.
And there's months in between, if not years, between deaths. So every time you're burying in the same place, that prior body's rotten. So it's not like you're exposing a corpse when you're digging. You just might see some bones. Then you throw another person in that same pit with some bones next to them and cover them back up. And in another fucking 10 months, another one goes in there. Out of 1,000 people, if they're not healthy, a certain number of them are going to die per year. That's just
and Ben points out too that some of them might have died in epidemics.
That too.
Which that might have checked, because most of the
disease going through there.
Well, and the bodies that we're talking about too, were largely from the early part of the 20th century.
Yeah.
So it could be that that a lot of people died in particular.
When I was in the army, fucking Murder Hornet, he's in there. He can attest to it. Out of 1,000 men, you had a couple of them dying every year. But we were all healthy. They weren't dying of disease. They were dying of drunk driving or getting killed in a fight.
Right.
But if you're incarcerated, basically, in a mental institution, your health isn't good. You're not really taking care of yourself maybe as well as a modern person.
Well,
and then there's disease going through there.
And allegedly...
And they're older. They're different ages.
And allegedly they could be doing weird shit to them in the hospital, too.
And also, they're probably, a lot of them are old. There's going to be people that are 60 plus. And they're going to die, I don't want to say of natural causes. They're going to die a little bit early. But they're dying in their 60s, 60 plus, because of the stresses of being crazy and being fucking in an institution.
Yeah, it's not like they were really living a
They're not really in a
relaxing
normal, right.
life.
Right, and if they got sick, then the chances of them being able to fight it off is not as good. You know what I mean? They don't really kind of have modern health care. So, and you know, if you died at 65 back in that era in a mental institution, they would think, yeah, he lived a full life. You know, that's how they would fucking look at it. You know, he was crazy. You know, he was in bad health. That's how they would look at it.
Ben said, so the allegations against the original superintendent might have been correct. Yeah, and I did point that out at the time. Like I said, a lot of stuff about him, he seemed like a cool dude and everything, but some of the charges made against him by the second superintendent may not have been just entirely pulled out of his ass, because they did find a lot of bodies buried in mass graves.
But it was the times.
That too. But the thing about it is that there aren't any... I mean, the records from the time, and I'm not saying this is anyone's fault, but the records from the time have been lost or have been thrown away or something like that. So all these bodies that they found, they don't know who they are.
Now, the income was coming from the state, right? The state was paying
This was a
them,
state hospital,
so the state is paying them to house them.
Yeah. One of a few state hospitals.
You have to understand, these are not totally healthy people. And they're not teenagers and people in their 20s. Some of these people are going to be older people. Crazy. And when they die, they don't have any next of kin. Nobody's related to them. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. They just bury them out back.
That's so sad to me.
Yeah. But, you know, and I don't think it's out of spite. It was just, that's how it was.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's what's sad, is that nobody means anything. It's not, you know, no one's being, no one's being shitty about it. It's just that...
They'll bury him out and back with the rest of them.
Right, it's like we don't know what else to do. Right. Like, this person doesn't have any relatives or anything like that. That's
you can't
just really,
send them to a funeral home and have
really
them buried in a
me.
cemetery and nobody'd show up, nobody pay for it. So you just buried them out in a bag. In the same places where you buried all the other ones. And they didn't even put a marker there because nobody's going to remember those people next 2 years, 5 years from now.
Yeah, that's what. Well,
nobody's
like I said,
visit that
I
person.
think that's what's really sad to me is that, and that happens to a lot of people. Like, a lot of people, they just die and like nobody.
That's it.
They don't have anybody to mourn them. Like, they don't have anybody to remember them or anything.
The state would have the power to do that. They'd be okay, yeah, excess dead people that are unclaimed bodies is what they would call it.
Yeah.
That person's dead. Yeah, just put them out there.
Well, and like I said, I get it. Like, you have to deal with that somehow.
Right.
But
they're not going to spend more money on them.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
But it's shitty. It's just a shitty situation. Like, all around.
We're looking at it from a civilized point of view, where you have a cemetery.
Well, yeah, I'm a civilized person. I'm not ashamed of that.
But they're more like in the wild. You know what I mean? They don't have any next to kin, or no sane people give a shit about them. The institution took care of them. They died of other causes. The institution says, okay, just bury them out back. And then they logged that person as, died.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to ask any questions because there's no next of kin.
Yeah.
And that person was there in that institution on the state's dime. The state was paying.
Yeah. Well, like I said,
it wasn't a private
hospital,
institution.
So,
right, yeah. So it's like, it's an unclaimed body. Dispose of it. Yeah. Now, they probably said a little prayer, but they put him in a hole and buried him up.
Yeah, I mean, most people, like, I feel like 99% of people, like, would at least say something.
Yeah, they probably said some shit. Had a little ceremony.
Right. Like, that they wouldn't just be like, fuck that. Like, most people wouldn't do that.
There may have been people in the institution that was friends with the crazy guy. They bring the other crazy people out. Okay, we buried him.
Yeah, say goodbye to them.
Say goodbye, and that's probably all it was. I wouldn't.
I would hope that they did at least that.
Yeah, if people knew and liked the person, they'd bury him.
Yeah, because you'd think that they had friends and stuff.
Yeah, from the institution. Yeah.
I mean, these are people, and like most of them, like some of them had problems and stuff, but it's like, I'm sure they were capable of having friends and shit like that.
This was a tougher time back then too, so that would have been considered a decent burial. You're not talking about a rich person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They get everything.
Hey, if you were fucking a Carnegie or a Morgan, no, you were going to be buried in a fucking sepulcher. What do they call it? Sepulcher. Sepultura.
No. Sepulcher.
No, in fucking Portuguese, it's sepultura.
Okay, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, which is a damn fucking a mausoleum or you know what I mean? And it was going to
Look how
badass.
important I was.
Yeah, it's gonna
now
look
you're dead, just like everybody else.
It's going to look Egyptian. It's got a door to go in, and
it's a little much. I feel.
Yeah, that's what it's going to look like.
They look nice though.
Yeah, it's Savannah, Georgia.
But
that's where in the United States, that's the best one we have in Georgia, Savannah.
Savannah is beautiful.
It's a beautiful cemetery,
actually,
and it's where a lot of
been there.
Rich people were buried, and it just looks like some Greek shit. It's just like if you ever see the old Joy Division album cover with the mourners, the funeral statues, the people mourning over the statue of the dead body and shit. That's from Savannah.
Xanada said you die 2 deaths, one when you physically die, and one when your name is spoken for the last time.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Ooh. Ooh. I've kind of thought about that before, but yeah, that's like when you put it like that, it's like kind of creepy. I don't know. I think I've kind of come to terms with, I'm at peace with the fact that I don't really care if people forget me after. I don't really care. I used to care, but I guess I'm getting to a point now where I'm just like, well, it's like, I don't really give a shit anymore. It won't matter. I'll be dead. It won't matter to me. You know what I mean? I don't know. It used to bother me, but it doesn't anymore. I still kind of think about it every now and then, but it doesn't bother me as much as it used to. So they don't have any records on any of these particular 30 bodies that they found in 2005. But I will note that in 1990, they had found another cache of bodies on the grounds. Because like I said, the hospital's not there anymore. The hospital closed in 1996, but the grounds are still in use by the university or whatever. Like they have some buildings there. But so they did find some other patient remains in 1990. Now those bodies, I believe, were cremated, and then they had like 2 big plots that they set up in the in one of the cemeteries in Stockton, and they put a big tombstone there just to commemorate all, because like I said, again, they didn't know who these bodies were either. So there's a big granite tombstone there that says unidentified from the state hospital. So at least they did do that. These were the ones they found in 1990, by the way, because they found a whole bunch of bodies there too. But at least they did do that. They did put a big tombstone there. Now, in 2005, after these remains were recovered, and this was another kind of case that's kind of linked to this hospital. So this woman named Joyce Tafoya, she came forward asking about her mother, whose name was Elizabeth, I believe Rathjen is the way that you pronounce her last name. Now, her mother, Elizabeth, had been a patient at the Stockton Mental Hospital, and she actually allegedly wandered off the grounds in the 1950s and was never seen nor heard from again, and nobody knows what ended up happening to her. So because Joyce Tafoya heard about these bodies found, she's like, oh, well, maybe that's what happened to my mom. Like, maybe she died and maybe they just threw her in a hole and it's like nobody knows who she is and blah, blah, blah. So she has kind of come forward and is trying to get them to do like DNA tests on all of the remains, like to figure out who they are and stuff like that. She's hired like detectives and all this other kind of stuff, like looking for her mom, like understandably. Now, according to the records that they still have for this hospital, Elizabeth Rathjen, who was her mom, she had schizophrenia, and she was admitted to the hospital in 1953, sorry. Now, she stayed there for 3 years until 1956, and then evidently one day she just wandered off. She was 32 years old at the time. Now, later on, and some people have alleged that this is maybe a cover-up, but the hospital, there are records of her that she was officially released, right? But nobody ever heard from her after that point, like after she wandered off from the hospital. Like her family never heard from her. Nobody ever like heard of her ever again. So nobody knows what happened to her. And her brother, Harold, he had actually, when she was in the hospital in the 50s, he had gone to visit her and he sent her money and had her stuff like in a warehouse, and her stuff was never picked up. So nobody really knows where she is. So like I said, her daughter has been on a crusade kind of to get these bodies that they found in 2005 like DNA tested to figure out if one of them was her mom, because obviously the family want to know what happened to her, because they don't, you know, she's been missing since 1956. So, you know, so she's been after him for that. However, the officials who have been digging up all these bodies and stuff like that have told her, they're like, well, none of these remains that they found in 2005, none of them could be your mom, because all of the bodies that we found are from the very, very early 20th century, like late 19th century, like from like 1900. You know what I mean? So these are like much older. Like your mom was still alive in 1956. These bodies are a lot older than that. And they said that the wood and the nails and stuff like that they found, like I mentioned earlier, like in the gravesite, were from the early 1900s, so they're presuming that that's when the bodies are from as well. So yeah. And the only other thing that I've heard about Elizabeth Rathjen was that there were reports that she had contacted the Social Security office in Sacramento, you know, shortly after her disappearance from the hospital, like after she left the hospital. They presumed she was trying to get hold of like maybe some money, like, as I guess she was getting payments from there, and while she was in the hospital she wasn't getting them. So I guess she went to the hospital or the Social Security office and was trying to sort that out. But that's the last time that anybody ever heard from her, and nobody has ever seen or heard from her ever again. And there's like a big mystery about what happened to her and like why there's no records. Like there's a record of her, but there's a record of her being officially discharged, and that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be the case that she kind of like escaped. You know what I mean? So it almost kind of seems like they're like, yeah, she was officially discharged, because after she disappeared, they're like, yeah, we don't want to deal with that bullshit. So they just said, yeah, we discharged her. We're washing our hands of it. So they still don't know whatever happened to that woman. They've never found her body or anything. And like I said, all the bodies that they found underneath the ground, they said that's probably not her. She's probably not one of them, because they're probably too old. So nobody knows what happened to her either. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I found on YouTube, this was actually kind of interesting. There were some snippets, not super long, but there were like 4 snippets of like an interview with this woman named Dolores. I don't know what her last name is, but she had worked at this hospital from 1955 to 1960. And, you know, notably, this was the same time that Elizabeth Rathjen had disappeared. So they asked her about that, but she didn't really know anything about it. So, she did say, though, that during the time that she worked there, she was aware of at least 4 men who had escaped. And she's like, I don't know what happened to 3 of them, but one of them I know for sure that he escaped, and then he later got hit by a freight train and killed.
Damn.
She's like, it was in the paper and everything. So, like, the cops came. But she's like, but I didn't know anything about Elizabeth Rathjen. She didn't know about that.
How did you get hit by a freight train?
Well, I'm sure he probably did it on purpose.
Yeah, you threw yourself in front of a fucking train.
Or it could happen that you were so drunk or high or whatever that you didn't know what you were doing. Yeah, because I've heard of that happening before.
It sounded like he fucking killed himself.
Wasn't there kind of a big thing? The weird thing is, like, I've written about a couple true crime cases where dudes whose wives were murdered or something, or were suspects in a case, like, it was very big in the Victorian era to kill yourself by throwing yourself in front of a train, particularly in England, which I'm like, why would you make such a mess for someone else to have to clean up? And why would you want to traumatize, like, everybody that was on the train? Like, why would you do that?
I don't know. Especially in an era. This is in the United States, you said?
Well, this was, but that wasn't. Well, the one I was talking about before was in the UK.
Oh, well, they probably didn't have ease of access of firearms. In the United States, women shot themselves or poisoned themselves. Main thing is poisoning.
Yeah.
Women take poison. They don't want to fuck the body up, I guess.
Well, like I said, we're in general, this is not true of everybody, obviously, but in general, women are other people focused. And I've thought of this before too. It's like, man, why would you kill yourself in such a messy way? Like, somebody has to see that. Somebody has to clean that up.
Yeah, a dude does that.
I would never.
A dude does that. That's what he wants.
See, I would never.
He wants to put on a big show.
No, I would never do that to somebody else. I would never do that to somebody else. Even in my lowest fucking point, if I even thought about doing something like that, I would still never be like, I'm going to do this in the most clean way possible, so nobody has to like see. Because look, I had a friend in high school who unalived himself, and he wrapped himself up. It was a couple years after high school. He wrapped himself up in a sleeping bag and shot himself in the face, pretty much, like shot himself in the mouth and blew his head off. And his dad found him. And I thought to myself, I like that dude and everything like that. I'm like, why would you do that to your poor fucking dad? Your dad had to see that, had to find you like that. And then somebody had to come in and clean that up.
It's an act of selfishness. Look at me, look at me.
I would never.
No.
Like I said, it just seems like, so I don't, and I,
yourself. There's
maybe that's like a weird thing to take away from all that, but it's like when I was writing, I was writing about this one true crime case in particular, and this happened like in the Victorian era in the UK, or like the early 20th century, where like a guy, his wife got murdered, and he got suspected, but they were like, no, it wasn't him, but he still couldn't deal with it, so he killed himself, and he threw himself in front of a train, and I was like, bro, I get it, but why would you do that? It's like you're not only making somebody clean up your mess, you're traumatizing the driver of the train, everybody that was on the train. They're never going to forget that.
Suicide was the dude that fucking got into the damn Cessna and started radioing in back to the control tower that a UFO was behind him.
Oh yeah, right.
And then it abducted him. All right. That's not what happened, but that's what he was said on the I think he jumped out of the plane.
Probably.
I think he jumped out of the plane is what happened.
But it's just I would never
but he
force somebody else.
I think he didn't want his parents to know that he killed himself.
I get that.
That's why he did it.
I get that.
He wanted them to think that he was off in another planet hanging out with the aliens.
Well, see, but that's a lot more.
Yeah.
I kind of get more if you're going to do that. Like, I'm just going to wander off into the woods and they'll never find me. Mm-hmm. Like, that's kind of shitty, too, because then, like, your family never knows what's happened to you, you know what I mean? Which is shitty in its own way.
Japan does that. They got all those people out there in the suicide
That's shitty in its own way, but I would argue that that's probably less shitty than making them find your fucking head blown off or, like, you splattered by a train or something like that.
This is how...
That's messed up.
This is how milquetoast the Japanese are. When they go out to go kill themselves in that suicide forest, they trail string behind them so they don't get lost. That's some weird thing. They can't just walk out in the woods and then.
Or maybe they want to get found.
No, because there's string around everywhere, and then I saw interviews, and they don't want to get lost out there because some of them will walk out there and then chicken out and walk back. Yeah. They follow the string.
Well, we did a whole show about that.
And I'm like,
what is it called? A Hokigahara?
Yeah.
The suicide forest.
And I'm like, you can't just walk in a single direction down the woods. They're so urbanized that. And it's not the wilderness as I would think of it. It's more like a park. It's fucking bizarre, man.
But still, I just, like I said, I don't get the whole throwing yourself in front of a train thing. Like, why traumatize all of those people? It just seems like I'm not shitting on people that you know, want to kill themselves because that's messed up. But it's just kind of like, why would you want to do it in a way that traumatizes even more people than you need to?
Well, some of them are getting back at people.
I guess.
Yeah.
But still, I would never do that. I would never do that in a million years. But yeah, so one of the guys, like I said, I don't know if he accidentally got hit by a freight train or if he on purpose got hit by a freight train. Yeah. But he escaped from there, and shortly after they found him.
Xanada said he sent me a video of a guy accidentally walking.
Yeah, you showed me that.
Yeah, it was in India or Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And he's just walking.
Like he didn't
the railroad
notice.
track and looked around. Whoa, a train's gonna just hit him. I don't know if the guy was deaf or what.
Yeah, it might have been like maybe he was deaf or maybe he wasn't. He was kind of out of it, or maybe he had earbuds in. I don't know.
Sucked him under.
Yeah, it was pretty fucked up. Yeah. Like he kept. I didn't really want to see it, but he's like, "No, you have to watch it. You have to watch." I'm like,
I
don't
can't really see. You see him going.
It's like, underneath. Dude, I don't really want to watch it.
Yeah.
But he made me watch it anyway.
Yeah.
Because that's how you do.
Yeah.
So Dolores, she was actually kind of interesting. And she talked about one female patient. She couldn't remember her name. Which is like, she was brought in and she was so violent that she broke all the restraints that they put on her and actually like hurt a bunch of the techs that were like trying to hold her, like trying to restrain her. Like she would like pop them in the face and stuff. And Dolores said the crazy thing was like this woman was like she was beautiful. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Can I get another drink?
I'm just going to give you some of mine.
All right.
I can't drink.
Like she said she was beautiful and she called her statuesque. But said she was completely delusional. She said one of her things was that she came in and she had a piece of paper and she said, "This is a check from Douglas Fairbanks Jr. For $20,000. Like he gave this to me." The hilarious thing to me was that the interviewer, I don't know how old the interviewer was, but asked this woman, "Who's Douglas Fairbanks Jr.?" And I was like, oh my God, I feel so old right now. Well, it's like, that's before my time too, but I know who that is. It was like a big movie star, like back in the old days. So it's like, so this woman comes in and has this piece of paper that she says is from Douglas Fairbanks Jr. because she had some kind of weird delusion that that he was her lover or was paying her off or something. So she had that. And Dolores also said this one was constantly like taking her clothes off. Like she was just always stripping her clothes off and like dancing around, and that she was completely delusional. Now this woman, like I said, whose name she could not remember, sadly, because it was a long time ago. She said this woman later on, like a couple months after she was brought in, died while receiving electroshock therapy. And Dolores said she saw this happen. She said it was her and another tech that worked there. And it's like, one of our jobs was to, bring the patients to wherever they needed to go that day. So it's like, so that day, me and this other tech, we were bringing this woman up to the electroshock room, like upstairs. And the doctor that was working, I think she said Dr. Patel. I think she said that's what his name was. But I couldn't really tell what she was saying. That's what it sounded like to me. And I had the closed captioning on, but it said crazy shit because it was auto-generated. So it's like, so I don't know if that was a dude's name or not, but that's what it sounded like to me. So it's like, so she's like, so we come up there and he puts and Dolores was not, she's an older lady. And like I said, she worked there in the late 50s. So she did not seem super horrified by the electroshock therapy procedure because I guess, like I said, a lot of people were doing it back then. So she's kind of like, I'd never really seen it before, but we brought her up there and they kind of strapped her down and did the thing. And she's like, and Dr. Patel, the way she was talking about it, she's like, he kind of seemed like he was, she didn't say showing off, but I think that's what she meant. She's like, he was kind of like explaining to them how, and this is how you do it. You just straight put them down and you put the electrodes on here or whatever. Like he was being Mr. Big Deal or whatever. And it's just kind of like, that's kind of the vibe that I was getting, like the way she was talking about it. And she said that, she's like, from what I understand, this doctor gave this woman either a lot more shocks or a lot longer shocks than usual. And the woman ended up dying on the table. And at that point, when that happened, Dolores and the tech were asked to leave and were never asked to bring another patient up to the electroshock therapy room again, even though they still kept doing it. They just didn't ask them to do it. And what she said, she's like, from what I understand, like normally patients that were receiving electroshock therapy would get it like 3 times a week. But she said if they were particularly violent or they didn't seem to be getting any better or seemed to be getting worse, then they would up it. Like either they would go more often or they would do it for longer, like when they were in there. Do you know what I mean? So she's like, so I'm not sure if that's what happened in this particular, because she's like, I noticed that the dude was like given, she's like, because I thought, she's like, from what I had heard, that they just did it for, they'd give you the electroshock and it was like not that long a time. She's like, he was like going to town. You know what I mean? And the woman died. So there was that. Now, she also said that if a patient died under a doctor's care and didn't have any relatives, that they were taken to the hospital morgue. She's like, it was in the basement of the receiving building where she usually worked, because she usually worked in receiving where they're bringing the patients in. If they did have relatives or were not, undergoing any particular treatment, then they would go to the coroner as you usually would, like, a person on the outside, quote unquote, like when they died. She said that the bodies left in the morgue were eventually cremated, but there didn't seem to be a lot of oversight because it wasn't clear whose jurisdiction all of this shit was under. Because she's like, because the interviewer was asking, well, didn't the state police ever come? She's like, I never saw the state police. She's like, I saw the county coroner one time, and she's like, and I saw like city police, like when they brought people in.
No,
but
they
she's
wouldn't
like,
have cared.
Right. So it's just like, so she's like, it wasn't real clear what the jurisdiction was. Like I said, she just worked there, so she didn't know everything that was going on. But yeah. Dolores,
Not to
what?
sound harsh, but they didn't care about these people.
No, obviously they didn't.
They're just like, yeah, they don't have any next of kin, dead. Barnum.
Yeah. Well,
it was just left under the care of the doctors. And
exactly.
And the staff,
Exactly.
They were the only people that cared. And I'm not going to talk bad about them. They're just doing what they have to do. They can't leave a body around stinking, rotten.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to claim it. They got to do something. They got to get it in the ground.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. That's what's kind of, it's just a shitty situation all around, because
nobody's
it's like,
coming
it's
for those
nobody.
bodies.
Right. Now I saved this for last because I thought you'd, because this is like your favorite topic.
Okay.
Dolores also made the rather shocking claim, and it doesn't have anything to do with electroshock therapy. I wasn't trying to make a pun. Yeah. That a guy who worked at the hospital while she was there, who also happened to be the husband of a friend of hers, was caught having sex with one of the corpses.
Now, why is this
in the
my
morgue?
favorite? Why is this my favorite subject?
Because I know how you feel about necrophilia.
I walked out on the show when she.
I know, that's what I was thinking of. So I was like, I'll save the necrophilia till last.
Oh man, that was a good show.
That's one of my favorite shows that we did.
I had to leave, man. I had to fucking leave.
You got so indignant.
Walked out of that shit.
And I just and the more indignant you got, like the funnier it was.
Yeah.
Like I said, fucking corpses is
that was that dude here in Florida.
It's not funny, but it's
he
just
in Florida.
I think he might have been, yeah.
He's in Florida back in
Florida man.
He was Florida in the early 1900s. Okay, so what happened?
I mean, there's a reason. Yeah, so she said this guy, she didn't see it happen, but she's like, somebody walked in on, he worked in the morgue, and apparently somebody walked in on him having sex with one of the corpses.
Was it a male or a female?
Oh, I don't know. She didn't say. I'm assuming it was a female. Because she didn't say otherwise. So I thought...
Well, was she hot?
Of course you would say something like that.
I think, well, there's got to be a reason. I mean, that's some weird shit.
Yeah. So, so he was one of the... And she remembered his name, too. His name was Carl Lewis, she said. I don't know if that was Carl with a K or Carl with a C. And he was one of the dudes that worked in the morgue that helped to cremate the bodies, she said.
Man.
Now, she said that he was arrested and that he stood trial, but she doesn't know what happened to him after that. She said his wife also worked at the hospital. She either quit, I guess she would, or transferred to another facility, and Dolores actually never saw or heard from her ever again, even though they were friends before that. Can you imagine?
Is there any record of it?
Well, I don't know. I'm just going by, I just found her talking about it. And she was very matter-of-fact about it. Because it happened a long time ago. So she's like, that happened. I heard about that. That was like a big thing everybody was talking about at the hospital like back. And this was in the late 50s. She said, I think it was 1957, she said. But like 1956 or 1957.
Damn.
And
so necrophilia going on.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, I can't imagine what would it be like you work with your husband, whatever, and then like all of a sudden somebody walks in and is like, hey Carl, what's up? And then like he's just banging a corpse, and you're just like, oh, can you imagine like how your wife would feel?
Yeah, you cheat on your wife with a dead chick.
Oh my god, you would never be able to show your face ever again. That would be like the worst.
That was before sex dolls.
Oh my god. That would be like fucking horrible.
Yeah.
So the interviewers asked her, they're like, okay, well, like, do you remember any other crazy shit that happened there? And she said, I didn't really see or hear of any of the staff abusing the patients, like in the 5 years that she worked there in the late 1950s. She's like, really the only sexual thing I heard about was the necrophilia thing, which is bad enough for Christ's sake. But that was an employee like doing that. She did say that a couple of the patients tried to choke her to death. And that she had one female patient, because I assume she worked on the female ward. She said she had one female patient bite her thumb so hard that she had to throw ice water in her face to get her to let go, and she said she still felt bad about it.
Yeah.
But the interviewer was like, well, you didn't want her to bite your thumb off. Like, don't feel too bad. It was just water. Like, it didn't hurt her or anything. One interesting thing that she said, and like I said, she's quite an older lady now. But they asked her, well, it's like, would you go back and do it again? Would you work there again? She's like, yeah, I probably would. And she's like, it made me a lot more compassionate, she said, working there. And she said specifically that a lot of she didn't say anything about, the people like all seem normal or anything like that. She said a lot of them were violent.
Yeah.
She said a lot of them were really violent. And like I said, this is the late 50s. So, I feel like earlier in the hospital's history, like maybe in the mid to late 19th century, you'd get more people that were just put in there for dumbass reasons and were normal. But as time went on, I imagine that only, people like the more egregious cases were put in there. So she said when she was working there, most of the patients were pretty violent or, were kind of hard to control. But she's like, for all that, she did garner a lot of, like I said, she learned to be a lot more compassionate toward people dealing with them, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing for her to say. But the whole necrophilia thing, I wonder how often that would, because like I said, she only worked there for 5 years, and this hospital was open for more than 100 years.
Some weird shit.
So who knows what went on.
You can go on YouTube, and I saw an interview, this is a couple years back, interviews from the 50s of a psychiatrist interviewing his patients, his mental patients. And one of them is just a pretty girl, maybe 30, in 50s clothes, and she's very well dressed, and she's an inmate or a patient at his hospital. And it's a type of catatonia, I think, is what she has. She'll sit and do nothing all day and answer questions, but just kind of be real airy-fairy, and she never commits to anything and never quite answers any questions. So I think he said that was actually one of the most common ones. It's a person that sits there and will not take any initiative,
right,
and not do anything, and will answer questions and chit chat, but it never really amounts to anything. If you can ask them questions and they'll give you real vague answers. Well, I don't know, but they will do nothing all day, and just sit there.
Right.
They'll take no initiative. They can't get a job. They can't.
Well, that's
have a life.
Depression.
Or it's like that. But she's funny, That was one of his favorite patients. She's very pretty. She's very sweet. But he's talking to the camera. She says she has no volition.
Yeah, that's depression.
Yeah.
That's what
no, it was a type of catatonia.
Well, yeah.
That's what he had. She had, and it was as soon as she was like 16, it emerged. That's and if you don't say anything to her, she'll sit there all fucking day,
right, smoking
cigarettes, and won't move, and won't do anything, and it'll just like talk to herself, know, and but that you can see examples of it on YouTube. So that's what they're talking about. But when you looked at her, she needs assisted living.
Yeah.
She couldn't do anything.
But she's not dangerous.
But not dangerous. Though I think a lot of ones that got locked up were ones that were the opposite, constantly
Well, especially
attacking.
as time went on.
Yeah.
I think in the early days of mental hospitals, like I said, you got kind of a mixture because they were just throwing everybody in there. It's like, look, they masturbate too much. Put them in there. Like, but there was nothing wrong with that person. You know what I mean? But as time went on, I think it got winnowed out to a point where, it was just people that were very obviously had some issues and had to be. But, not always, I guess. I don't know. I don't really know, like, a huge amount about it, like, in the more modern era. But there you go.
So that was your investigation. Probably nothing real nefarious about it. It was a normal hospital.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, the thing about it is that, there's nefarious stuff going on, but I don't think that it was a standout in that regard.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the same stuff was going on, and worse stuff was going on at other hospitals. This one actually seemed a little bit better, but it could be just that they were better at covering stuff up, too.
Maybe.
Possibly.
It's more likely that nothing was really happening there. Nothing out of the ordinary. See, this is what makes our channel a little bit different. Other channels probably would have really sensationalized this and dug up a lot of third and second-hand fiction about it. Jenny will investigate it. You know, she will go right to this from the sources of the day. You know, contemporary sources. And if this is what she dug up, then that's what's out.
Because I think stuff is interesting on its own merits.
Yeah.
I don't think that you have to make stuff up or.
So on this show, we'll kind of sometimes a lot of the shows we're demystifying things. But the thing is that you can demystify. If nothing's happening, that's what you got to say. There's other shit that we talk about on shows that is kind of fucking weird. And if it's weird, we'll talk about it. Some weird shit I've seen on my own. But this here, I don't think there's much here.
I mean, I don't think it's any worse than the other hospitals that were going. I mean, yes, they did electroshock therapy. Yes, they sterilized people. Yes, they did lobotomies.
Yeah.
Which is awful. But other hospitals, that's what they were doing at the time. So I don't think it was I don't think it was particularly worse than any other place in that regard.
Yeah, and how they disposed the bodies, that's the same as in a state penitentiary. If you had guys that died when they were in the penitentiary and nobody fucking collects the bodies, they just get buried out in the back of the boneyard. And I don't even think there's markers.
Yeah. Well, in this case, there absolutely wasn't because they just came across the bodies while they were building something else.
Yeah, those dudes that they kill on death row, if nobody claims that body, they go out into a little boneyard out in the back. You know, nobody cares about those dudes.
Yeah.
They were hated.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any next of kin, so just put them in the ground. But when they put them out there, you know what I mean, their friends say a thing, you know, if they're on death row, their friends can't go out there. But if they're just in a fucking maximum security penitentiary, his friends might actually bury him. Because some of those dudes do have friends in the penitentiary. You know, they're not free people. And I've seen programs on that. But it's the same thing.
Ben asked, is it haunted? It does have a reputation of being haunted, but I don't think it has like a real big reputation for being haunted. I found one video on YouTube of a paranormal group that went. I mean, the buildings aren't there anymore. It's like now part of the California State University at Stanislaus. So you know they have their buildings there. So they did go and investigate. But you know the video is like 15 minutes long, and obviously it was just them walking around being like, "Hey, I hear something." You know what I mean? So it wasn't that. Yeah. But it does have a slight reputation for being haunted. Just like I feel like every site that either still is an asylum or is an abandoned asylum or used to be an asylum is going to have reputation for being haunted. And this is no different. But I don't think it's not like a super famous haunting or anything like that. But I did find one video of like a paranormal group like investigating the grounds. But they didn't see any. I just kind of scrolled through it and it's like they didn't really see anything exciting. So I'm just going to say that. Xanada said, I've been in a catatonic state for 30 years. It's a good defense mechanism. Yeah. I mean, you know what I mean. Yeah. So there's that. All right. Let's see. You weren't allowed to take the bodies of prisoners, were you? Said Ben. Yeah. Could you? Like if somebody died, if somebody got executed, could their family could take the body and bury it somewhere else?
Yeah.
Like I would think that, I mean, they're dead. They can't really do anything else.
When their dead sentence is served.
Yeah, so their family could take them?
Yeah.
Just most choose not to?
Most of them don't have families. The families don't want anything to do with them.
I mean, you can't blame them.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah, I mean, when they cooked Ted Bundy, what did they...
Yeah.
Nobody came and got his ass, did they?
No.
Now I'm kind of curious. Did anybody claim Ted Bundy?
I don't think so.
Who would claim Ted Bundy?
Next of kin usually wants nothing to do with them.
Yeah, I feel like even his mom probably wouldn't claim him. It's like, fuck that guy. Seriously. But yeah, so Murder Hornet said, had a high school friend that worked at an asylum, And the ones that would act up, instead of hitting them, he would kick them in the balls so it would leave no marks. So wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you know. I'm sure that probably happened a lot. You're not supposed to do that, obviously, but I'm sure it does happen. All right, so it's getting to be 10, quarter to 11. So I guess we're going to wrap it up. I kind of had fun on this show.
Yeah, good show.
Even though, like I said, I found this really interesting. Like I said, I kind of find this stuff interesting. I don't really like to sensationalize stuff for the sake of sensationalizing it. So I just kind of like...
Go with what's there.
I'm not going to like make shit up or say stuff that didn't happen. I'm just going to lay it all out there for everybody. So yeah. So hopefully you guys enjoyed my deep dive into this history. I had a good time looking into it, going down the rabbit hole as I usually do. So thank you again very much, Jennifer, for suggesting this topic because it was really interesting. And hopefully you guys can join us again on Friday night for our sidetrack show. We're just going to drink and fuck around and talk about a bunch of bullshit like we usually do.
And interact.
And we're probably going to have a little bit more booze and then probably go to bed. So hopefully you guys have a good rest of your night. Have a good day tomorrow. And we will see you guys again on Friday night. Good night.